The conscious meat illusion. You are a slab of meat, a wet, pulsating mass of tissue wrapped in skin. Beneath that skin, blood flows through tubes, nerves spark, muscles twitch. Glands drip chemicals that tell your body how to feel. You decay slowly from the moment you're born, and one day, you will die. Your brain will stop firing, your organs will shut down, and your body will rot. And yet, somehow, you think you're more than that. You believe you're a soul, a mind, a self, something divine trapped in a prison of flesh. But what if that belief is the illusion? What if there's no ghost in the machine, only the machine? What if consciousness isn't some radiant force, but just electric goo in your skull, hallucinating purpose? This is the conscious meat illusion. The story your brain tells itself to cope with the horror of being matter that knows it's dying. Think about it. Every thought you have is just a neuron firing. Every feeling, joy, guilt, rage, love, is just chemicals sloshing across synaptic gaps. Serotonin, dopamine, cortisol. Push this button. Feel happiness. Pull this lever. Feel fear. It's mechanical, predictable, programmed by evolution to help your meat survive just long enough to reproduce and die. And yet, you believe in something deeper. You say, I, like it means something. Like there's someone behind the curtain pulling the strings. But when scientists search for that self in the brain, they don't find it. No control center, no throne room. Just a messy tangle of neural networks talking to themselves. Just a story told by meat. And still, you believe. You believe you make choices. That you are free. But your choices emerge from biology you didn't choose. From instincts baked into your genes, from trauma, memory, cultural input. You were shaped, chemically, physically, long before you had the tools to question any of it. You say you love. But what is love if not oxytocin and childhood imprinting? You say you hate. But what is hatred if not cortisol reacting to perceived threat? You say you have dreams. But what are dreams if not meat hallucinating on autopilot during nightly maintenance cycles? Still, you kneel. You pray, you meditate, you chase meaning. Because if you admit the truth, that you're just animated flesh, that everything you are is just a brief glitch of organized electricity, it might break you. So you build stories, beautiful stories, souls, spirits, destinies. You call yourself more. But deep down, you feel the contradiction, the pull between divinity and decay. You sit in a hospital room and watch your parent forget your name. You hold the hand of someone once so brilliant, now unable to form a sentence. The brain dies before the body does. And the self? It doesn't ascend. It unravels in front of you. And still you believe, because to stop believing feels like death before death. You cling to the idea that you are not your body, but you are. Every thought you think is body. Every feeling is meat. The ego is a neurological side effect. The soul, if it exists, is entangled in meat so completely that if the meat breaks, the rest collapses with it. You bleed, you stink, you age, you digest food and excrete waste like every other animal. You are mortal, finite, and yet you wear clothes, build cathedrals, write poetry about eternity. Why? Because your meat is conscious, and that's the horror. Animals live and die without ever questioning why, but you know it will all end. And so you construct something to survive it. A myth, a mind, a self that feels separate from the decay. But it's not separate. It's just the most advanced hallucination your meat has ever produced. You are meat that knows it's meat and still thinks it's divine. So what do you do with that? Do you collapse, rage, despair, or do you find something beautiful in the horror? Because maybe the magic isn't that you're divine trapped in flesh. Maybe the miracle is that flesh can think it's divine, that meat can mourn, can love, can imagine galaxies and compose symphonies while slowly dying. Maybe the miracle isn't escaping the body, it's being in it. To be conscious meat is to suffer, to break, to rot with awareness. But it is also to feel, to connect, to dream in colors that no other animal can describe, to taste music, to cry at language, to say, I love you, and not know why it hurts so beautifully. You will die. You will decompose. Your consciousness will flicker out like a candle in wind, and the world will go on. The meat will return to soil, and the illusion will end. But until then, you have this breath, this moment, this fragile, temporary hallucination of being someone, and maybe that's enough. The pain-proof loop. You know what hurts. You remember it in your bones, the heat of betrayal, the sting of rejection, the cold ache of abandonment, and yet, you reach for it again. You touch the same flame. You walk into the same storm. You beg the same silence for answers. This is not madness. This is something far worse. This is the pain-proof loop, a cycle in which the mind knows, but the body moves anyway. The heart screams, but the soul whispers. Maybe this time it will be different. You are not broken. You are repeating. And your repetition wears the mask of freedom. Think about it. You fall in love with someone who shows the same red flags. You take the same risks, though you've bled before. You return to the same addictions, the same temptations, the same people, the same traps. But here's the twist. You don't walk back in because you forgot. You walk back in because you remember. And still, you choose it. Why? Because there is a part of you that believes you must master the pain to escape it, that you must relive the wound to rewrite the ending, that if you keep touching the fire long enough, one day it won't burn. But pain doesn't work that way. It brands you deeper each time. It doesn't forget. And neither do you. You just bury it under the illusion of choice. Take the example of someone who grew up in chaos, emotional neglect, abandonment, trauma. Fast forward 20 years, and they find themselves in relationships that feel familiar. Not safe, not kind, but familiar. They say things like, I don't know why I'm drawn to them. Or, I know they're bad for me, but I just can't leave. That's the pain-proof loop in action. The mind isn't seeking happiness. It's seeking what it already knows, because what it knows feels controllable, even if it's suffering. Neurologically, this has a foundation. The brain is wired to seek patterns, not peace. When you experience something repeatedly, like betrayal or abandonment, it becomes a neurological template, a blueprint. Your nervous system adapts. It learns to brace for impact. It mistakes survival for comfort. So, when you find yourself outside the chaos, you feel lost, unsafe in peace, unanchored in love, and so you return. Not because you want to suffer, but because your brain is whispering, this is what we know. This is where we are strong. Freedom in this context becomes a lie you tell yourself to justify the loop. You say, I chose this, when in reality, your choice was hijacked by unresolved pain. You say, it's different this time, when your wounds are coloring the entire world. You call it love, but it's repetition. You call it growth, but it's stagnation. And still, you call it yours, because that illusion of agency is less terrifying than admitting you are trapped. The pain-proof loop doesn't just live in relationships. It lives in career paths that destroy you, friendships that drain you, habits that dismantle your spirit. The artist who creates only in chaos, the healer who forgets to heal themselves, the person who always finds a way to be the villain in their own story, even when the world hands them a blank page. Over and over, they choose what hurts. Not because they hate themselves, but because they haven't met the version of themselves who doesn't. Here's the most haunting part. The pain-proof loop rewards you. It gives you identity. It gives you narrative. It gives you something to survive. Without it, who are you? Without the heartbreak, the struggle, the internal war, what's left? Sometimes we confuse peace with emptiness because we have been forged in fire for so long that stillness feels like death. Healing feels like losing the plot. So we go back, and back, and back. But what if freedom isn't the absence of pain, but the courage to stop rehearsing it? What if growth is not about becoming unhurt, but about refusing to be hurt the same way again? What if the real rebellion isn't surviving the fire, but walking away before it starts? Let's go deeper. Think about the animal experiments that studied learned helplessness. A dog placed in a box receives mild shocks. At first, it tries to escape. It jumps, scratches, howls, but after repeated failure, it stops trying. The door is left open, and the dog doesn't run. It has learned that pain is inevitable, that it has no power. That resistance is useless. That is what trauma does to us. It teaches us that pain is normal, even deserved. So we stop running, we stop questioning, we stop believing in exits, and even when the door opens, we stay. But you are not a lab animal. You are not data in a trauma chart. You are not the sum of what hurt you. You are capable of leaving. But first, you have to mourn the version of you that believed the pain was love. You have to grieve the story that made suffering noble. You have to let go of the idea that freedom is earned through fire, and that is terrifying. Because freedom requires boredom. Yes, boredom. Stability, consistency, peace. And that feels wrong when you've lived in storms. It feels flat. But maybe the quiet isn't emptiness. Maybe it's space. Space for a new story. A story where you don't need pain to feel alive. Where your worth isn't proven through endurance. Where you don't need to touch the flame to know it burns. You've touched the fire enough. You've bled enough. You've explained, justified, forgiven enough. The loop doesn't end when the pain stops. It ends when you stop reaching for it. And maybe today is that day. Repeating until it's real. You don't need truth to shape a person. You just need repetition. Say something false once, it's a lie. Say it again, it's suspicion. Say it enough times, and it becomes someone's memory. Act like it's true, long enough, and it becomes their identity. We were taught that truth has an inner strength, that it will outlive falsehood simply because it is real. But reality doesn't win by default. It wins by persistence, and so does fiction. There is a mechanism in the mind, quiet, automatic, dangerous, that confuses frequency with truth. Psychologists call it the illusory truth effect. The more you hear a statement, no matter how wrong, the more familiar it feels. And the more familiar it feels, the more your brain lowers its resistance. It starts to sound right. Not because of logic, but because of comfort. It's why propaganda works. It's why abusers can convince victims they're to blame. It's why you might still believe something about yourself that was only said to you once, but echoed for years. The brain doesn't store truth in a separate cabinet. It stores what it rehearses, what it repeats. Truth becomes a casualty of exposure, and performance becomes survival. Imagine this. A child is told they're worthless, not once, not in violence, but in small, sharp echoes, subtle neglect, dismissive glances, withholding praise. Over time, the words never spoken become the loudest voice in the child's mind. I don't matter wasn't learned in a classroom. It was rehearsed in silence. The child grows up, and without even realizing it, starts performing the lie. They shrink in conversations. They apologize too much. They accept poor treatment. And worst of all, they begin to defend that lie as if it were their own personality. They say, I've always been like this. But no, that wasn't you. That was the mask you were taught to wear. And then wore for so long, it started to feel like skin. Repetition is how culture programs you. It's how institutions shape perception. Say something patriotic enough times, it becomes unquestionable. Say something hateful enough times, it becomes policy. And say something self-destructive enough times, it becomes your inner voice. The scariest part? The brain doesn't warn you when this is happening. It doesn't whisper, hey, this is your fifth exposure to this lie. Be careful. It just integrates seamlessly. You think you're remembering, but you're actually just rehearsing. You think you're being authentic, but you're actually performing a script you didn't even write. Consider the placebo effect. People are given sugar pills, but told they'll heal. And they do. Not because the pill had power, but because the belief was repeated with conviction. Now, take that same mechanism and reverse it. What happens when the repeated message is, you'll never change? You're broken? You're not good enough? The body responds, the mind follows. Not because it's true, but because it's loud. Your subconscious is not a courtroom. It doesn't care about evidence. It cares about consistency. If a thought returns often enough, it becomes architecture. And eventually you stop recognizing the walls. Social media exploits this on a massive scale. You scroll. You see the same idea, the same outrage, the same opinions framed in slightly different colors. You don't even click. But the repetition has already begun. Later, when asked your thoughts, you'll feel a vague certainty. Not because you analyzed it, but because it's familiar. Your mind filled in the gaps and called it insight. We don't think what's true. We think what's rehearsed. Look deeper. This isn't just about lies we hear. It's about lies we tell ourselves. That we're too late, that we've missed our chance, that we'll always be this way. These aren't conclusions, they're echoes. Somewhere someone repeated that story, or maybe you did, in a moment of pain, and now it plays on loop. Not because it's you, but because it's practiced. It takes discipline to unlearn what repetition has made real. You can't just confront a lie once and expect it to dissolve. You must speak truth back to it, over and over, like a song, like a muscle, like a daily ritual. Because your brain won't believe what's said once. It believes what is sustained. The trick is, you can reverse it. You can repeat a new truth until it roots. You can act from a better script, one that aligns with your actual values, not inherited wounds. You can train your mind to see beauty where it was told to see shame. You can remember something better, not because it already existed, but because you gave it repetition. Practice becomes memory. Memory becomes belief. And belief becomes freedom, if you insist on it. It won't be easy. The lie has home field advantage. It's older, it's louder, and it often wears your voice. But repetition isn't loyalty, it's momentum. And momentum can be broken. All it takes is awareness and a new echo. So, what do you want to become real? Speak it, act it, then repeat. Waking before you're born. What if your first memory wasn't from your childhood, but from before your birth? What if, long before your lungs ever drew breath, you had already dreamed of the life you now live? Of rooms you'd never entered, cities you'd never walked, people you'd never met, yet somehow felt heartbreakingly familiar? This isn't fiction for some. It's a whispered truth people feel but can't explain. A recurring dream. A scene they swear they've lived, but couldn't possibly have. The color of a hallway they've never seen before feels like home. The scent of a stranger triggers the warmth of a mother's hug they haven't received yet. These fragments appear before logic ever catches up. Imagine this. You're 6 years old, walking through a marketplace in a city you've never visited. But as the dust kicks up from the cobbled street, a scent hits you. Spiced apples, wet stone, the sound of a particular wind chime, and suddenly, your eyes widen. Your heart pounds. You've been here. Not in a dream, not in a memory, in something older than both. Science calls these things cryptomnesia or coincidence, but deep down, this wasn't forgotten memory. It was pre-memory. A glimpse of something before you existed. A script read before you took the stage. What if your life is not a blank canvas, but a reassembled puzzle? What if you've already walked this path, before bones were formed, before the first heartbeat? Some ancient part of you, unborn yet aware, already rehearsed your tragedies, rehearsed your joys. That version of you was real. Consciousness may not be a light that flicks on at birth, but a flame that passed through darkness, briefly whispering secrets before it was buried in silence. Have you ever woken from a dream that felt older than you? A landscape that wasn't fantastical, but architecturally real. Trees you could describe down to the texture of bark. A stranger's voice that still echoes in your chest, or a decision you made in the dream that haunts you in waking life, because it felt like it cost something. Something real. Something unrecoverable. What if those aren't dreams? What if they're bleed-throughs from a state before embodiment? The unborn mind trapped in timeless lucidity, absorbing echoes of a life not yet lived, or worse, of a life you once lived before and were forced to repeat. There's a chilling theory known in certain circles as pre-birth cognition, the idea that some form of proto-consciousness exists before neural structures form. It doesn't think in words, it doesn't perceive in pictures, but it feels in archetypes. It absorbs emotional imprints of what's to come, like a soul watching the trailer of a movie it cannot change. Now imagine you're that soul, watching, waiting. You see the pain, the betrayal, the beauty, the final goodbye, but you cannot speak. You cannot intervene. And then one day, you wake up in a hospital crib, crying. Not because you're scared of the new world, but because you already missed something you can't remember. Because the silence after watching it all unfold has deafened you. This is why you chase echoes. Why you feel déjà vu walking past a stranger's house. Why you write poetry about heartbreak before you've even been kissed. You are remembering the unrememberable. Feeling the ghost of something that never lived in time, but always lived in you. Take the case of Maya, a woman in her 20s who always felt haunted by a narrow red staircase with peeling wallpaper and a dangling lamp. She dreamed of it constantly as a child. One day she visits her grandmother's childhood home in a remote town she had never been to before. And there it was, the staircase, exactly as she saw it. Her mother turns pale. "That house burned down before you were born," she says. "We never showed you pictures." Or Jamal, who as a boy scribbled names and places in his school books, none of which made sense. His parents thought he had an overactive imagination. Decades later, as an adult reading an obscure book on Eastern Europe, he stumbles across those exact names. Villages, locations, people, from the 1800s, long gone, no family ties, no connection, just there, etched into his memory like scars from a war he never fought. The rational mind scrambles to explain this. Genetics, unconscious knowledge, synaptic misfires, but none of these are satisfying when your bones ache with the familiarity of a place your passport says you never left for. None of this helps when you cry over a stranger's face in a crowd because you swore you once held their hand, before either of you could walk. Some spiritual traditions say we choose our lives before we live them, that we review the path, agree to its challenges, and leap into the body with full awareness. But once we enter, we forget, not as a punishment, but as necessity. Because if we remembered everything, we'd never move. We'd be paralyzed by the weight of foresight. We'd live in fear of each pre-seen loss, each betrayal, each failure. Forgetting is mercy. But remembering, by accident, is the most terrifying gift. So when you dream of faces you don't know but miss like family, when you feel grief in a field you've never visited, when you stand still in a crowd because a chill runs through your body like a name being called across lifetimes, don't dismiss it. You're not broken. You're bleeding through. The veil that was supposed to shield you from the unbearable truth slipped. You woke up too early. You remembered something you were meant to forget. You walked the dream before the birth. And now, like a ghost haunting its own future, you wander this life with pieces of a puzzle that doesn't belong to time, only to you. What do you do with it? You live. You breathe. You follow the echoes, even when no one else hears them. You honor the memories that have no place, no origin, no proof, because they chose you. And maybe, just maybe, the life you're living now isn't your first draft. Maybe it's your second chance. Or maybe it's the life you ran from. And now you've finally woken up inside it. Healed, but never whole. You can be healed. You can build a beautiful life. Laugh again, breathe without weight, and even fall in love with the future. But you will never truly be whole. Because healing is not a reset. It is not erasure. It is not the undoing of what was done. It is the art of moving forward while still carrying the shadows of what once tore you apart. The version of you that broke doesn't vanish when you're better. It watches. It lingers. It echoes inside the walls of your mind, reminding you not just of what you survived, but of what it cost. Imagine this: a shattered glass glued back together. It holds water again. It functions. But look closely, and the cracks remain, thin fractures like veins across its surface. That's what it means to be healed, but never whole. The trauma doesn't drain from your bones like poison. It integrates. It lives in your reactions, in your reflexes, in the sudden stillness you feel when a scent, a voice, a phrase brings back something you didn't invite. Healing is learning to live with that reflex without being consumed by it. Some people imagine healing as a bright dawn, a moment where the darkness is finally gone. But the truth is, it's more like learning to walk again after a limb has been severed and replaced. You may learn balance. You may learn movement. But the phantom limb still aches. You still feel it in the quiet moments. That's not failure. That's memory stored not in thought, but in nerve, in muscle, in marrow. And yet, the world often expects wholeness. Once you smile again, once you speak of the past with calmness, they assume it's over. They assume you're better in the way they want to believe, perfectly restored. But healing isn't performance. It's not for them. It's survival. It's private. It's sometimes ugly. Sometimes lonely. And most of all, it's incomplete. Because there are pieces of you that will never come back. Not the same way. You can forgive the people who hurt you. You can understand why they did what they did. You can even rise above it. But somewhere in you, the version of yourself who didn't deserve it, who begged for safety, still exists, still waits to be heard, and healing doesn't kill that voice. It finally lets it speak. You don't silence the child who cried. You hold them closer. You let them shape the strength you now carry. You learn to be the protector you once needed. But that need, it doesn't vanish just because you've outgrown the danger. There's a version of you who knows what it feels like to be powerless, who flinched at raised voices, who assumed blame in order to feel in control. That version of you is real, and healing isn't pretending they didn't exist. It's acknowledging them with reverence. It's understanding that your vigilance, your people-pleasing, your hyper-independence, they were all adaptations, survival tools. And just because you're safer now doesn't mean those reflexes disappear. You just get better at noticing them, naming them, gently guiding them. You don't amputate your past. You integrate it. Let's be honest, sometimes you'll look at yourself and wonder how much damage is left. You'll catch yourself flinching from intimacy. You'll sabotage something good. You'll numb out. And then the shame will whisper, I thought you were healed. But healing isn't immunity. It's awareness. The difference is that now you catch it, you pause, you reflect. And maybe you choose differently. Not every time, but more than before. And that's progress. That's power. The person you were before the trauma. Maybe they were innocent. Maybe they were hopeful. Maybe they were unguarded. And maybe you miss them. Maybe you grieve them. That grief is valid, because healing means letting go of the illusion that you'll ever return to who you were. You won't. That version of you was lost in the fire. But who rose from the ashes? That person is wiser, more compassionate, aware of pain in others, less quick to judge, more capable of holding complexity. There's beauty in that, even if it came at a cost. Sometimes you'll encounter people who want you to get over it, as if pain has an expiration date. They mistake your functional exterior for a full recovery, but they don't see the nights you still wake up in sweat. They don't hear the inner monologue that still questions your worth. They don't know how hard you worked just to show up, and maybe they never will. But healing isn't about proving anything. It's about reclaiming your right to exist as you are, with your scars, with your triggers, with your depth. You can still laugh while healing. You can fall in love. You can succeed. But that doesn't mean you're untouched. It means you are living despite it. It means your joy is earned. It means your light is not naive. It's defiant. You shine knowing how dark it once was. And maybe that's what makes you powerful. Not that you healed completely, but that you continued when you didn't have to. That you carried the weight. That you stumbled and still moved forward. No, you're not who you were before the trauma. But you're still here, still breathing, still learning, still building. And maybe wholeness isn't about being unbroken. Maybe it's about being aware of every fracture and choosing to keep living anyway. Because healing doesn't erase the storm. It teaches you how to walk in the rain without drowning. And if you've ever thought that healing would make you forget, know this. Memory is not your enemy. It's your proof. Proof that you endured, that you transformed, that you adapted, that somewhere in the chaos you chose to keep existing. You chose to live. So yes, you're healed. But no, you're not whole. Because wholeness was never the goal. Truth was. And the truth is, you're allowed to carry your past as long as you don't let it drag you back. You're allowed to remember the pain as long as it doesn't silence your future. You are allowed to still feel it sometimes, even on your brightest days, because healing is not the death of pain. It's the decision to grow around it, to bloom through the cracks, to love even with scarred hands, to live even with haunted lungs. The self that watches. You walk through your life like a movie you're only half in. You do things, eat, speak, cry, laugh, but a part of you isn't really there. It's watching, narrating, standing behind your own eyes like a shadow with a clipboard, always commenting. You're doing fine. That was stupid. She didn't mean that. They hate you. Sometimes it sounds like you. Sometimes it doesn't. But it's always there. The watcher, the quiet observer, the voice that speaks not to the world, but to you, about you, as if you were someone else. This is the self that watches. A fracture in your being so quiet, so constant, you stop noticing it. But it's not harmless, because this narrator, this ghost inside you, is not neutral. It edits, it judges, it rewrites. And over time, you forget which self is the real one, the one who lives or the one who watches. You might think it's a quirk, a coping mechanism, but the truth is darker. It's a split. A survival strategy forged in moments when full presence would have broken you. Maybe in childhood, when you were punished for being too loud, too sad, too real. Maybe in relationships, where you learned to scan for danger, even during joy. Maybe in trauma, when dissociation wasn't a disorder, it was salvation. And so, you split, not once, but over and over, 1,000 paper cuts of separation, until the only way to exist was to watch yourself exist. You become your own audience, your own critic, your own ghost. This watch yourself isn't new. Philosophers called it the witness. Psychologists call it metacognition. Some spiritual traditions frame it as the higher self, detached, observing, enlightened. But for many people, it's not enlightenment. It's exile. You didn't rise above your life. You left it. You became the narrator of a story you're too afraid to live firsthand. Because to feel fully is to risk fully. And feeling too much once meant drowning, so you hover. You intellectualize emotions. You analyze memories. You study your sadness like it's someone else's. You perform joy with a delay, smiling in the mirror to see if it fits. You tell yourself, I'm okay, not to feel okay, but to stop feeling anything at all. This fracture becomes the frame through which everything passes. Even love. You watch yourself fall for someone. You observe your own laughter. You take mental snapshots of every kiss, not to savor it, but to prove later it happened. Because you're not convinced you were there. You live your life like an alibi. The pain is that this self, the one that watches, feels smarter, safer. It keeps you from impulsive words, chaotic feelings, raw vulnerability. But it also keeps you from the one thing you're starving for, being real, being messy, being present, being whole. The watcher self does not cry. It documents tears. It doesn't fall apart. It critiques the collapse. It doesn't beg, scream, rage. It sits calmly, explaining why you feel that way, what childhood wound was triggered, what archetype you're embodying. It's the therapist in your skull, the narrator in your chest. And slowly it becomes the only self you trust, because the real you is too wild, too unpredictable, too alive. But that life, that chaos, that rawness is where healing lives. Consider this. A child doesn't watch themselves play. They just play. No meta-commentary, no distance, no lens, just presence. And in that presence is freedom. So why did you stop? Because somewhere along the way, the world taught you that being fully yourself was unsafe. That presence was risky. That emotions were threats. That if you didn't self-monitor constantly, you'd be rejected, mocked, left behind. So now, every moment is filtered. Every action pre-cleared, every word rehearsed. You don't just live, you direct the scene, adjust the lighting, write the script, edit the footage, then play the role. And by the time you feel anything real, it's already been processed, drained, rendered safe. But here's the catch. The watcher self is a mask, a clever one, but still a mask. It gives you the illusion of control, but it starves you of truth. And you cannot heal from pain you refuse to feel firsthand. You cannot love through a lens. You cannot grow while hiding from the soil of your own heart. So, what do? You let go. Bit by bit. You stop narrating and start noticing. Noticing what coffee tastes like, what your hands feel like, what it's like to cry without explaining the tears. You practice being present, even if it terrifies you, even if you shake, even if the watcher screams that you'll drown. You won't. The watcher self will not disappear overnight. It will claw for control, whisper warnings, beg to be listened to. But you can thank it. You can say, you helped me survive, but I'm not surviving anymore. I'm living now. And in that living, you might feel lost at first, like a diver without a tether, a body without narration. But then something strange happens. You start to feel the world again, not through thoughts, but through being. A breeze doesn't become a metaphor. It just moves across your skin. A smile isn't a signal. It's just joy. And for once, you don't need a witness, because you are no longer the ghost in your own life. You're back. Time you can't touch. Time is the one thing you live inside, but can never hold. You were born into its river, swept forward by its current, unable to swim back or leap ahead. The past shaped your bones, carved your memories, and designed your instincts. But it's locked now. Closed. Irrevocable. A museum you can visit in thought, but never touch again. The future, meanwhile, is fog. Unlived. Unwritten. A place your mind obsesses over, but your body will never reach until it's too late to prepare. And in between these untouchables, you stand. Caught between ghosts and guesses. That's the tragedy of existence. You are always too late for the moment that made you, and too early for the one that might save you. And yet, all of your regrets live behind you. All of your hopes live ahead. But your power only exists in the sliver of now. A sliver you barely notice as it vanishes beneath your feet. Think about it. You can recall a moment from 10 years ago and feel it like it's happening again. Your heart will race. Your skin will tighten. You might even cry. But that moment is gone. It lives in neurons, not in the world. It isn't real. It's a ghost. And yet, it haunts you, defines you, owns you. Why? Because the past has weight. It built your identity brick by brick. And even though you can't touch it, it still touches you. Now, imagine the future. You spend hours there every day, wondering, worrying, planning, dreaming. The future is your favorite fiction and your most familiar fear. But no matter how hard you try, you cannot go there. You can guess. You can prepare. You can build for it. But you will never arrive until the present quietly becomes it, without warning, without drama. One day it's tomorrow, and then it's today. And then, it's gone. That's the strange nature of time. It is your constant environment, but your mind resists it. You live between two unreachable places, the place you lost and the place you haven't reached. And yet, you're always tempted to live in both. This is why you rehearse arguments that already ended, why you imagine conversations that may never come, why you punish yourself with what-ifs and seduce yourself with some days. Because your mind doesn't know how to rest in now. It keeps flickering like a broken projector, stuck between the last frame and the next. But here's what no one tells you. The past doesn't exist anymore, and the future doesn't exist yet. All you ever have is this moment, and even it doesn't stay. It's not stable, not solid. By the time you notice it, it's already becoming memory. You don't live in time, you chase it. This is why life feels like sand slipping through your fingers, why even happiness feels like a trick. You laugh, and suddenly the moment is over. You cry, and suddenly you're just remembering the ache, not feeling it. Time cheats you. It gives you meaning, then robs it. It gives you chances, then calls them past. It gives you presence, then demands you forget it. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the reason you can't return to the past is because it wasn't meant to be redone. Maybe the reason you can't enter the future is because it's not owed to you. Maybe what matters is not where you are in time, but how you carry it. Because even though you can't touch time, you can shape what it leaves behind. You can turn memories into lessons. You can turn fear into direction. You can carry the pain of your past like armor, or like a weight. That choice is yours. And even though time doesn't stop, you can. You can pause, breathe, be aware, because the moment you do, you anchor yourself to the only thing that's real. And in that pause, you can forgive the past. You can stop fearing the future. And you can finally do the thing we're never taught to do. Live now, fully, without negotiation. Time is indifferent. It won't wait for you to be ready. It won't stop when you beg. It won't explain itself. But it will keep moving. Whether you mourn it, waste it, fear it, or cherish it, it moves. The only question is whether you move with it. You are not a prisoner of time. You are its witness, its sculptor, its survivor. The past is a language. The future is a riddle. And the present is a canvas. Choose what you write on it, because the next moment is coming. Whether you're ready or not, whether you're present or not, whether you're brave or still hiding in memory. Memories that lied first. You think your memory is the one honest witness in the courtroom of your life. You believe it stood by you, watched everything unfold, and stored it like a sacred archive, unchanged, untouched, unbroken. But it didn't. It edited. It exaggerated. It rearranged, and worst of all, it lied first. Not by accident, but by design. Long before you had the tools to tell fact from fiction, your emotions were already scribbling in the margins of your story. Fear tinted the pages red. Love smeared the truth with gold. Shame blacked out entire paragraphs, and pride added scenes that never happened. So now, you're not living the life that happened. You're living the life you remember, which isn't the same. And that difference, it's everything. Imagine this. A child spills a glass of milk. The parent snaps, shouts, the child flinches. The moment lasts 10 seconds, but in the child's memory, it grows roots. It becomes a defining trauma, a story of failure, embarrassment, a reason to never take risks again. Now zoom out. The parent barely remembers it. It wasn't rage, it was stress, it was exhaustion. But for the child, it becomes the day they decided the world is unsafe. That's memory. It doesn't keep records, it writes myths. Your brain doesn't store reality like a camera. It filters it through hormones, attention, mood, and belief. You remember the shape of a moment, not its weight. You remember the scream, not the silence. You remember the betrayal, not the 1,000 loyal acts that came before it. Because memory is not truth. It is a story your survival instincts agreed to believe. And here's where it gets dangerous. Once emotion rewrites memory, memory rewrites you. Ever said, "I know what I felt"? That's the trap. You think feeling equals fact, but feelings don't prove truth. They shape it. They twist your recall until it's more about how you felt than what happened. And the deeper the feeling, the stronger the distortion. So, when someone breaks your heart, your mind rewinds every previous moment and finds new meanings in old smiles. Was that fake? Was I blind? Did they ever love me? And suddenly, your memories morph. The laughs don't sound real anymore. The good moments lose color. The bad ones get louder. That's memory reacting to pain, not reflecting truth. And you believe it, because the voice that lies is using your own. This happens even with yourself. Maybe you weren't always shy, maybe you weren't always angry, but memory, once it chooses an identity for you, starts cherry-picking the evidence to support it. You become the villain or the victim, the coward or the champion. Not because that's who you were, but because that's what your memories needed to believe to protect you, or to justify you. Let's talk science. Psychologists call this memory reconsolidation. Each time you recall something, you don't retrieve a file, you rewrite it. The more you revisit a memory, the more you change it. You're editing your past every time you remember it. And you don't even realize it's happening. Every act of recall is also an act of reinvention. This is why eyewitness testimonies are so unreliable. Why people can sincerely remember things that never happened. Why siblings raised in the same house tell completely different stories of the same events. They didn't lie. Their memories lied first. And when memory lies early, it lays the foundation for every belief that follows. That teacher who humiliated you in 3rd grade, you might carry that moment forever, not as a blip, but as proof that you're not good enough. A 5-second glance from a stranger might become the reason you distrust people to this day. Not because they were dangerous, but because your body felt danger and your memory obeyed. You might hate someone now because your memory cherry-picked all the worst moments. Or you might idolize someone who hurt you because your memory erased the warning signs. It's not your fault. You're not weak. You're human. And humans are built to feel first, remember second, and rationalize third. But that order comes at a price. Sometimes the cost is clarity. Sometimes the cost is peace. Sometimes the cost is knowing who you really are. So, here's the terrifying question. If your memories lied to you, who are you really? Are you shy, or were you told not to speak? Are you angry, or are you remembering someone else's anger as your own? Are you unlovable, or did a broken person convince your memory that love always hurts? The truth is, most people never remember their lives. They remember their pain. And pain is the worst editor. It censors joy. It exaggerates wounds. It recycles trauma like a broken reel on loop, skipping over every good scene. But if memory can lie, it can also heal. Because if you're brave enough to question your memories, you can rewrite the lies. Not to erase the past, but to reclaim your story from the emotions that hijacked it. You can revisit the child who thought they were a failure and tell them, You were just learning. You can revisit the heartbreak and remember that there were good days, that love did exist, even if it didn't last. You can rewrite the narrative that you're broken and finally realize you were just misremembered by yourself. Forgive your memory. It didn't mean to betray you. It was just trying to keep you safe. But now, you're not that scared child anymore. You're not that wounded version of yourself that needed a lie to survive. You can face the truth, even if it hurts, because the truth may not always feel good. But unlike memory, it doesn't have to lie. Mirrors you don't recognize. You've never seen your own face. That's not poetic exaggeration. It's a literal truth. The image you have of yourself is built entirely from reflections, lenses, and filtered approximations. When you look into a mirror, you're not seeing you. You're seeing light bouncing off a silver-coated sheet of glass, flipped horizontally, distorted by curvature, lighting, emotion, and expectation. You've been copying a stranger your whole life, and somehow, that stranger became you. Think about it. Every time you looked into a mirror growing up, you were being introduced to a reversed version of your face, a mirror twin. Not the way the world sees you, not the way cameras capture you, just a flattened illusion with its left and right flipped, subtly shifting based on your posture, the lighting, your mood. And yet, you built your identity on that illusion. You combed your hair based on that. You practiced smiles. You learned to hate or love features that may not even exist the way you think they do. Your self-perception is a game of broken telephone, played through glass. But mirrors aren't the only way you learned yourself. Photographs, too, play their part, but they're just as unreliable. Lenses warp. Focal lengths exaggerate. The flatness of a photo drains dimension, emotion, nuance. And when you see a photo of yourself, you don't see it neutrally. You see it as someone who already believes you look a certain way. The mind fills in what the camera misses and edits what it doesn't like. So what you see is never objective. It's curated, dissected, internalized, and other people, their perception of you is equally strange. They see you through their own projections, memories, moods, assumptions, comparisons. Their version of you isn't you. It's what they filter through them. So the person they describe, praise, mock, love, or judge isn't truly the entity that sits at the core of your being. It's a performance of reflections, a puppet show of impressions. Identity, then, is a mirror hall, not a single self, but dozens, rotated, bent, magnified. You've never met your real face, not once, not in a mirror, not on screen, not through another's eyes. So what does that do to your sense of self? You live inside a body you've never truly seen. You recognize a voice that's filtered through bone and air. You carry memories painted by perception and stitched together by unreliable narrators, your past selves. What if identity isn't a solid, fixed object, but a ghost we chase through fog? What if we're made entirely of reconstructions? There's a psychological term for this fragmentation, the looking glass self. It's the idea that your identity is shaped by how you believe others perceive you. Not how they actually do, but how you think they do. You become a mosaic of imagined judgments, approval, rejection. You sculpt your face not in stone, but in opinion. You change how you speak, stand, express emotion, all to align with mirrors you don't even recognize as false. And yet, those mirrors guide your entire life. Consider how children first become self-aware. A baby touches their reflection in a mirror, believing it to be another person. Only later do they realize it's them, but it's still not truly them. It's a representation, an echo, and that echo becomes the bedrock of their identity. We are born not knowing ourselves, and we die still chasing the outlines of a shape we've never clearly seen. You don't meet your real self in a mirror. You meet them in silence, in grief, in love, in choice, in contradiction. Your real face isn't physical. It's revealed in how you treat others when no one's watching. It's stitched into the values you keep when you could have walked away. The face behind the face. The one no reflection can reveal. But here's the paradox. Even if you've never seen your face, the world reacts to it constantly. Strangers smile at you, or don't. People make assumptions about your character based on your jawline, your eye shape, your tone. You're judged by something you can't even verify. You suffer or benefit from reactions to a version of you that lives entirely outside your own gaze. And this creates a psychological dissonance because you feel misunderstood by people who only know the visible layers. And yet, they treat those layers as the whole truth. So, what do you do with that? Do you keep polishing mirrors, adjusting angles, filters, facades, or do you accept that the search for an authentic self may never lead to a clear image, but instead to a deeper question? Who am I when no mirror can tell me? This is where things become haunting, because some people spend their entire lives trying to match their internal world to the external reflection, seeking validation, cosmetic correction, social approval. They chase perfection in the mirror, hoping it will finally align with the ghost of their real self. But it never quite does, because mirrors lie. They show you how you appear, not who you are, and the two are never the same. You might remember times when you caught your reflection unexpectedly and didn't recognize yourself. That eerie moment of dissociation. Is that really me? That's not insanity. That's a moment of truth, a glimpse into how little we really see ourselves. And it reminds us, identity isn't discovered, it's constructed. Not once, but every day. Every reaction, every breath. You are not a fixed sculpture, but a moving shadow, shaped by everything you've seen and everything that's seen you. Maybe the point isn't to find a final image of yourself, but to realize that you are allowed to be many things at once. Uncertain, fluid, unfinished. You are a mirror that reflects others while never truly showing itself. You are presence without image, soul without a lens. So the next time you stand before your reflection and feel that strange distance, the quiet question of, is that me? Don't panic. Don't despair. That feeling isn't failure, it's freedom. Because it means you know that you are more than appearance, more than imitation, more than projection. You are the mystery behind the mirror, the face that cannot be seen, but is always there, watching. Dreams that change you. You wake up breathless, not because of a noise, not because of movement, but because of something that never happened. A face you've never seen. A goodbye that broke your chest. A kiss so vivid you could still feel the warmth on your lips. But it was just a dream. And yet, something inside you shifted. You are not the same person who fell asleep. This is the mystery we rarely speak about. How a dream can rewrite your inner world. How, in a span of minutes, your mind can invent an entire life. A love, a death, a loss. And make you feel it so deeply that the emotional residue clings to you for days, weeks, sometimes forever. Dreams aren't just stories, they're experiences. And your brain doesn't always know the difference. It processes dreams in the same neural architecture that handles waking memory. Meaning, that grief you felt in the dream, the funeral, the crying, the ache of being left behind, your body recorded it. It happened, as far as your nervous system is concerned, even if no one else ever saw it, even if no one else remembers it, even if it vanished the second you opened your eyes. You can fall in love with a stranger your brain invented. You can mourn someone who never existed. You can live out a life in a dream, grow old, watch the seasons change, say your final words, only to wake up in your same bed, the same age, with no one beside you. And somehow, that changes you. You carry the ghost of something unreal, and no one can take it seriously, because it didn't really happen. But you know what you felt. Dreams collapse time, they bend logic. In one blink, you're a child again. In the next, you're burying someone. You experience decades in moments, and the emotions are not diluted. They are raw. Why does this happen? Neuroscience offers clues. During REM sleep, your brain's emotional centers are lit up, while the logical centers go dim. The amygdala, the hippocampus, they surge. Meaning you feel everything with intensity, but you can't critically analyze it. You're inside the moment, not thinking about it. And that's what makes it dangerous and beautiful, because what happens in a dream leaves fingerprints on your psyche. You wake up angry at someone who wronged you in the dream. You avoid someone because they felt distant last night in your subconscious. You start writing poetry about a place that doesn't exist. You carry that grief, that joy, that yearning, as if you lived another life while your body rested. And in a way, you did. Dreams can change your path. You wake up and realize you don't want the job. You don't love the person. Or worse, you do. But you never saw it clearly until the dream broke your defenses. It gave your subconscious a voice, and once that voice is heard, you can't unhear it. Some people dream of apocalypse and wake up ready to change the world. Some dream of dying and wake up with a sense of urgency that reshapes everything. Some dream of being a child again, just holding their mother's hand, and it unravels years of tension in a single tearful morning. That is the quiet power of dreaming. Not just escape, not just imagination, but transformation. And the strangest part, you have no control over it. You didn't choose to dream of her. You didn't decide to relive the accident. You didn't script the emotion. But your brain did, for reasons you may never fully understand. Maybe to heal, maybe to warn, maybe to remember. You can forget 1,000 days of your waking life, but never forget that dream, the one that shattered you, the one that saved you, the one that whispered something true when you weren't awake enough to fight it. Dreams bypass your armor. They get in where waking life can't, and sometimes they change your course in ways you only understand years later. So when someone tells you it was just a dream, you smile, because you know. Some dreams aren't stories, they're thresholds, and once you pass through them, you never come back the same. The decision that decides you. You tell yourself you made the decision, that you weighed the options, calculated the risks, followed your gut, or maybe your heart. You remember the moment, your hands trembling, your breath held in your chest, the silence before the yes or no. But what you don't remember is who you were before that decision, because some choices don't just change your path. They erase the version of you that made them. This is the decision that decides you, a paradox hiding in plain sight. You think you chose, but it was the choice that chose who you'd become. You feel it when you look back. Not all decisions are equal. Some were small, what to wear, what to eat, what route to take home. But others, they split reality. A yes that ended a friendship, a no that closed a door forever, a silence that rang louder than any scream. And the moment you crossed that line, something inside you, subtle, irreversible, shifted. The person who hesitated, who debated, who wasn't sure, ceased to exist the second the decision locked into place. Think about the first time you betrayed your values to protect someone, or sacrificed your dream for safety, or said, "I love you," not because you meant it, but because they needed to hear it. Those aren't just events, they're redefinitions. You don't walk away the same. You walk away rewritten. The self that would have said no dies, and the self that said yes takes the stage, wearing your face, holding your memories, but with a different spine. This is not metaphor, it's psychology. When we make irreversible decisions, especially ones with moral, emotional, or existential weight, the brain performs something called cognitive realignment. You begin to rewire your beliefs, your memories, even your identity to fit the choice you made, because to live with a decision that doesn't align with your identity would tear you apart. So you change the identity to survive the choice, and in doing so, you become the choice. Imagine a soldier pulling the trigger, a parent giving up a child, a whistleblower pressing send, a survivor walking away and never looking back. These aren't decisions you make. They're decisions that make you. You don't get to return to the moment before. Not really. Because the version of you that stood trembling on the edge is now a memory, a ghost held in the past by the gravity of what you did. This can be empowering, transformative. You rise from certain decisions like a phoenix, reborn, unrecognizable, forged in clarity. But other times, it's haunting. You made the best choice you could with what you had, but the weight didn't lift. It grew roots inside you. And the echo that lingers isn't, "Was it right?" It's, "Who would I have been if I chose differently?" That's the wound most people never talk about. Not regret, absence, the version of you that never got to live. The road not taken didn't just vanish. It's haunting you. Every smile you didn't give, every life you could have touched, every version of you that stayed silent or spoke up or walked away when you didn't. These aren't ghosts. They're the unlived lives inside you. And every major decision is a funeral for one of them. We talk a lot about identity as something we build, brick by brick, experience by experience. But what if it's also something we lose? What if identity is carved not by what you choose, but by what you never chose again? Take the addict who chooses sobriety, the lover who chooses goodbye, the runaway who chooses to stay. These decisions aren't just forks in the road. They're self-erasures. The moment of choice becomes the new foundation, not just for what you do, but for who you are allowed to be. And every day after, you're no longer reacting as your old self. You're defending your new one. It's a kind of quiet violence, the kind you live with when you feel you've betrayed a former version of yourself for survival, or for someone else, or even for a greater good. You smile, you move on, you adapt. But sometimes, deep in the night, the ghost of who you could have been presses its fingers against the glass of your consciousness and asks, "Did I deserve to die for this version of us to live?" And sometimes, there's no answer. That's the weight of irreversible decisions. They don't just shape the future, they seal the past. They fossilize a moment into something you can never return to. And they demand you become someone who can live with what was done, even if you wouldn't do it again. But that's also where freedom lies. Not in pretending the past didn't change you, but in owning the version of you that survived it. You can mourn the self you lost. You can carry their memory like a photograph you never got to take, but you're here now. You're the result of every unbearable decision, every line crossed, every silence kept. You are the sum of your consequences, and that means you are real. So the next time you find yourself on the edge of a decision that feels like the end of the world, pause. Breathe. Not because the choice isn't worth making, but because you are witnessing the final moment of a version of you that won't survive it. Honor that self. Then step forward. Not with certainty, but with reverence. Because what you choose now won't just decide your path. It will decide you. The fear of getting better. Everyone says they want to heal, that they want to feel whole again. But deep down, there's a quieter truth most people never admit. Getting better is terrifying. Because healing means losing the person you were when you were hurting. It means shedding a version of yourself that, for better or worse, became familiar. And familiarity, even when it's painful, is hard to let go. You say you want peace. But peace feels foreign after a lifetime of chaos. You say you want confidence. But what are you without your insecurities? You've worn them so long, they've started to look like skin. And when you think about healing, a strange resistance rises. Not because you don't want it, but because you don't know who you'll be without the wound. This is the paradox of recovery. You crave escape, but fear transformation. Because transformation doesn't just take away the pain, it takes away the identity you built around it. And whether you realize it or not, pain became your compass. You shaped your beliefs, your boundaries, your relationships around it. You learned how to navigate life with it. And now, you're being asked to abandon that map and walk into unknown territory. Who are you when you're no longer broken? That question haunts more people than they'd ever admit. Because suffering, while brutal, creates certainty. I'm like this because I was hurt. That sentence has power. It gives you a reason, a narrative, a shield. But healing removes that shield. It doesn't just ask you to feel better, it asks you to become someone new. And that's the part no one warns you about. Healing is grief. You grieve the version of yourself that coped through survival, that hid behind sarcasm, that kept people at arm's length, that found identity in sadness, that learned how to cry silently in public and laugh loudly in private to confuse the pain. That version of you was strong, but it wasn't free. And freedom is disorienting. When you begin to heal, the habits you used to cling to, overthinking, self-sabotage, chronic doubt, start to loosen their grip. And what replaces them? At first, nothing. Just space, stillness. And that stillness feels unbearable because silence is louder than noise when you're not used to it. Joy feels fake. Rest feels lazy. Safety feels suspicious. You wait for the old pain to return because it always did. You hesitate to trust the calm because it usually meant the storm was next. And worst of all, you start to feel guilt. Guilt for feeling okay when others around you aren't. Guilt for leaving behind the version of yourself that suffered so loyally. But healing isn't betrayal, it's evolution. You're not abandoning who you were. You're honoring them by choosing not to stay there. You're saying, "Thank you for surviving, but I don't need to live in survival mode forever." You're saying, The pain that shaped me doesn't need to define me. That's not weakness, that's courage. Still, it won't be smooth. You'll relapse into old thoughts. You'll miss the numbness. You'll feel nostalgia for your own misery, because at least you understood it. You'll catch yourself performing sadness just to feel like yourself again. And that's okay. It means you're shedding. Not pretending, not regressing. Shedding. Healing is not a straight line. It's a spiral. You'll return to the same wounds, but each time with more wisdom, more clarity, more compassion. And slowly the wound becomes scar tissue. And the scar becomes a story. And the story becomes something you own, not something that owns you. But first, you have to face the fear of who you might become. And that fear is real, because getting better means saying goodbye to the identity that pain gave you. And identity, even when it hurts, is hard to release. So, if you feel scared to grow, scared to let go, scared to feel joy, don't shame yourself. Recognize it. Speak to it. Say, I know you're afraid, but we are allowed to become someone new, someone safe, someone at peace, someone free. Because the goal of healing isn't to forget what hurt you. It's to remember it without needing to be it. You are not your suffering. You're the witness, the carrier, the architect of what comes next. And healing doesn't mean you lose who you are. It means you finally meet the version of yourself that was waiting behind the pain. Helping, that hurts. You want to help. You see someone in pain, struggling, drowning, and everything inside you screams to reach out, to pull them to safety. You offer your hand. You offer your heart. You offer yourself. Because that's what love is supposed to do, right? Love protects, love rescues, love saves, but sometimes, love suffocates. Sometimes, the moment you step in to save someone is the exact moment they stop saving themselves. Not because they're weak, but because you became their reason not to grow. You meant well, but your comfort became their undoing. This is the paradox no one teaches you. Help, given too early, can become harm. Protection, given too often, can become a prison. And love, when it refuses to let someone fall, can quietly rob them of ever learning how to stand. It starts small. You do something for them they could have done alone. You clean up the pieces of a mistake they needed to face. You hold their hand through a storm that was never yours to calm. You give and give and give until they forget how to give to themselves. And the worst part? You feel good doing it, because helping feels like love. But it also feels like control. It makes you feel strong, needed, important. You become the hero. You write yourself into their story as the one who rescued them. But behind that rescue is a quiet theft. You're taking away the fight they needed to face. You're building a soft wall around their fear so they never learn how to meet it. And every time you shield them from pain, you also shield them from growth. Have you ever seen a butterfly break free from its cocoon? It struggles, it twists, it suffers, it takes hours. And if you try to help, if you tear open the cocoon to spare it the effort, you cripple it. Its wings won't develop, it won't fly. The struggle was necessary. Without the pain, it stays broken. That's what people forget when they rush to fix someone's life. Pain is not always the enemy. Sometimes pain is the only teacher that can't be ignored. There's a story of a father who sees his son failing over and over, at school, in relationships, in life. So the father steps in. He pays the bills, makes the calls, fixes the consequences. He thinks he's saving his son from drowning, but he's only keeping him underwater longer. One day the father dies, and the son, now a grown man, is lost. Not because the world is too cruel, but because he never built the muscle to survive it. The love that once protected him became the chain that kept him from growing. And sometimes, we're not just helping out of love. We're helping because we need to be needed. Because if they heal, if they rise, if they walk without us, what does that make us? What's our role then? This is the quiet ego of the helper. We don't admit it out loud, but sometimes we don't want them to get better. Not yet. Because their weakness gives us purpose. Their pain validates our presence. And so, we disguise control as compassion. We call dependence devotion. We say, they'd fall apart without me, never realizing we've built a world where they're not allowed to rise. That's not love. That's fear. Real love doesn't cling. It doesn't shelter. It stands beside pain, not in place of it. It says, I won't take this burden from you, but I'll stay while you carry it. It says, you might fail, and I won't stop you, but I'll be here when you get back up. There's a difference between support and sabotage. Support says, I'll help you build the strength. Sabotage says, let me do it for you. One leads to growth. The other leads to dependency. You think you're saving someone, but you're just stopping the fire that would have forged them. You put out their spark before they could burn away their weakness. And now, every time they fall, they look for you, not themselves. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is stepping back. Let them hurt. Let them fail. Let them lose. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough not to interfere with the one thing that actually creates change: consequences. Growth doesn't come from being carried. It comes from crawling, from bleeding, from learning the shape of your own strength. And no one can walk that path for someone else. So ask yourself, are you helping them, or are you protecting yourself from watching them struggle? Are you loving them? Or are you loving the way they need you? It's okay to feel helpless. It's okay to ache for them. But your ache is not their answer. Your rescue is not their redemption. And your comfort is not always kind. Sometimes, the most painful thing you can do for someone you love is let go. Not to abandon them, but to return their life back to them. To say, I believe in your ability to rise. To say, this pain is not the end, it's the beginning. Because if you love someone, truly love them, you don't save them from their storm. You remind them they can survive it. Alone but surrounded, you're in a room full of people. Their eyes are on you, their voices are near. Laughter echoes, conversations move around you like tides, but something is missing. Not attention, not company, something deeper. It's the feeling that no one truly sees you. Not the real you, not the version beneath the gestures, the polite smiles, the practiced responses. You're surrounded, but alone. Not because you're invisible, but because you're distorted. Because every person who looks at you doesn't see you. They see a projection filtered through their own fears, desires, judgments, and wounds. And in that reflection, you vanish. We grow up believing that connection comes from proximity, that if we're with people, talking, laughing, sharing, we must be known. But that's a myth, because presence is not the same as perception. People don't see you as you are, they see you as they are. A person with abandonment issues may see your silence as rejection. A person with control issues may see your freedom as threat. A person carrying shame may see your confidence as arrogance. And so, no matter how clearly you speak, your words bend through the prism of their history. You speak in one frequency, and they hear another. It's like trying to sing your soul in a room full of broken radios. You learn to perform. You learn to adjust. You shapeshift to be easier to digest. You become quieter around the loud. You dim your joy around the sad. You play wise around the insecure, and humble around the arrogant. And slowly, imperceptibly, the true you begins to fade. Not because you're lying, but because you're surviving. You're adapting to mirrors that warp your image until you can barely recognize it yourself. And yet, even surrounded by people, you ache for one thing: to be seen as you are, without translation, without costume. This is the tragedy of being conscious in a world of projection. You are not only carrying your own truth, you are carrying how others misinterpret it. And sometimes, the weight of those misinterpretations becomes heavier than the truth itself. Someone accuses you of coldness when you're simply thoughtful. Someone assumes arrogance in your silence when you're just protecting your peace. Someone mistakes your care for manipulation, your distance for disdain, your passion for threat. And you wonder, how many versions of me exist in this room? How many ghosts of misunderstanding do I have to compete with just to be known? Connection requires risk. Real connection means revealing parts of yourself that can be misunderstood, rejected, or feared. But the irony is, most people aren't listening to you. They're listening to their own inner commentary while your mouth moves. They're not hearing your pain. They're measuring it against theirs. They're not receiving your story. They're waiting to inject their own. And so, you learn to edit, to shorten, to censor, until conversation becomes performance, until your presence becomes a role. And still, you feel it, that invisible scream, that aching whisper inside you that says, there's more. There's so much more I want to say, to be, to show, But the room isn't built for that kind of honesty. It's too fragile. It demands simplicity. It demands predictability. So you give them the version they expect and mourn the one they'll never meet. And the worst part? Sometimes even you forget who that real version was. The act becomes reflex. The mask becomes muscle memory. And then you're alone, not just from others, but from yourself. This isn't just emotional, it's neurological. The human brain is wired to categorize, to reduce complexity into familiar patterns. So when someone meets you, their brain doesn't start fresh. It pulls from past experiences. That means they may see their ex in your eyes, their father in your anger, their rival in your success. You trigger their unfinished stories. Their memory, not your presence, becomes the author. And suddenly, you're no longer a person to them. You're a symbol, a screen, a vessel for unresolved feelings. And that's why it hurts. Because deep down, you know they're not reacting to you. They're reacting to the shadow you accidentally remind them of. So, what's the answer? Is there any escape from this isolation in plain sight? The truth is, rarely. But sometimes, once in a long while, you meet someone who listens cleanly, who pauses their own noise long enough to hear the frequency behind your words. Someone who doesn't need you to shrink, who holds your complexity without reducing it, who asks questions not to control, but to understand. And in those rare moments, you feel the armor fall, the fog lift, the ache soften. That is what it means to be seen, and it is holy. But until then, you may walk through crowds that mistake your gentleness for weakness, your pain for drama, your silence for disinterest. You may be misunderstood by those closest to you. You may feel alien in your own family, invisible in your own community, but you are not alone in feeling alone. Millions carry this same wound. Millions speak in crowded rooms while quietly mourning their own erasure. You are not broken. You are just waiting to be met in the language you speak best: truth. So, let this be your reminder. Your value does not decrease because someone misreads your heart. Your reality is not less real because it doesn't fit their script. And your identity is not a mirror to be validated. It is a flame to be honored. You don't need everyone to see you clearly. You just need someone. Even if that someone is you. Because sometimes, the most important thing isn't to be seen by the world. It's to not forget what you actually look like beneath their gaze. Sleep that doesn't rest. You close your eyes because you have to. Not because you want to, not because the day is done, but because your body is shutting down. Because the weight behind your eyes has become unbearable. Because you've reached that point, again, where nothing else makes sense but sleep. And so, you surrender. You let go. You disappear into the dark. But it doesn't save you. It begins again. The noise, the pressure, the chase. A dream that feels like running with weights strapped to your chest. You're late. You're trapped. You're falling. You're failing. Everyone's watching. No one's listening. You try to scream, but your voice sticks. You try to wake up, but the dream holds tight. And when the morning finally pulls you out, you're exhausted, like you fought a war no one saw, like you traveled through chaos just to open your eyes and start over. This is sleep that doesn't rest. This is the place that was meant to heal you, turning into the loop that resets your pain. You wake up, and nothing feels better. The body hurts. The mind is fogged. You feel like a broken machine still forced to power on. And everyone around you says the same thing. You just need a good night's sleep. But they don't understand. You had one. Hours passed. Dreams came. But none of it brought peace. Because not all sleep is healing. Not all unconsciousness is rest. Sometimes you close your eyes and your mind turns the lights back on. Your brain replays the worst of the day, rewinds your fears, projects your failures in high definition, and it doesn't ask permission. You're just there. Caught in a theater you didn't buy tickets for. The lights won't turn off. The doors won't open. And when the show ends, you're the one left sweeping the broken pieces in your chest. Why does this happen? Why does the thing that's supposed to restore you leave you more fractured? Stress, trauma, anxiety. They don't shut off just because you lie down. In fact, they often get louder because the distractions are gone, because your defenses are down, because the body may sleep, but the mind stays watchful, restless, searching for threats even in dreams. This is the paradox of chronic exhaustion. You crave rest more than anything, But when it arrives, it betrays you. Your subconscious doesn't care that you have to work in the morning. It doesn't care that you're trying. It only knows what it hasn't processed, what it hasn't healed. So it loops, it replays, it warns, it screams. It builds mazes of tension and keeps you trapped inside. And when you wake up, the pain didn't leave. It just put on a new face. So now, sleep isn't a sanctuary. It's a battlefield, a continuation of the noise. You're afraid to lie down, not because you can't sleep, but because of what waits for you in sleep, that restless churn, that chaotic weather in your skull. And slowly you start to fear the one thing that's supposed to make everything better. You start to fear closing your eyes. But here's what no one tells you. Rest is not the same thing as sleep, and sleep is not the same thing as healing. You can sleep for 12 hours and wake up shattered. You can sleep through the night and still carry yesterday like an open wound. Real rest begins before you fall asleep. It begins when you give yourself permission to feel, when you stop pretending that you're fine, when you stop carrying the day into the night like armor you forgot to take off. It begins when you stop trying to outrun your own mind and start listening to it. What is it afraid of? What pain hasn't been named? What wound keeps bleeding behind your eyes? Because unprocessed emotion doesn't disappear. It waits. And when you sleep, it takes the stage. So maybe the question isn't, how do I sleep more? Maybe the question is, how do I rest while awake? You rest when you say no. You rest when you stop performing. You rest when you stop punishing yourself for being tired. You rest when you stop expecting sleep to fix a soul you refuse to tend to. And slowly the dreams change. They soften. They speak instead of scream. They show you what you've buried, not to torture you, but to free you. They become less like nightmares and more like messages. And when you wake up, you don't feel whole. Not yet. But you feel seen. You feel heard. You feel like your mind didn't just run laps around your suffering. It understood it. That's when sleep becomes sacred again. Not a trap, not a cycle, but a home. You close your eyes, and it's quiet. Not because the world is perfect, but because you finally stopped fighting it in your dreams. Numb, but still feeling. You sit in the quiet and say, I feel nothing. Oh, but even that nothing hurts. Not in the loud, screaming way pain usually arrives. Not like a broken bone or a heartbreak that shatters. No, this pain is quieter, thinner, like air that's been hollowed out. You are numb, but somehow still feeling. You're not drowning. You're watching yourself drown. You're not burning. You're frozen inside the fire. This is not apathy. It's awareness trapped behind glass. This is the paradox of emotional numbness. A body that doesn't react, and a mind that won't stop noticing. There are moments when your face doesn't move, when your voice sounds like it's coming from someone else, when people ask, are you okay? And you can't even lie convincingly, because you don't look sad, you don't cry, you don't scream, but you want to. Desperately. Something inside you is clawing for release, but the claws don't reach the surface, and so you just exist. Barely. Mechanically. Replaying every second of silence like it means something. Like silence itself is speaking. Like the universe is whispering, feel this anyway. This is what it's like to be numb, but still feeling. To not feel joy, but remember what it once tasted like. To not feel grief, but recognize the absence. To laugh without warmth, and love without weight. You touch things, but there's a layer between you and the world. Like gloves on your skin. Like static on your soul. And yet, beneath that thin film is a screaming self. One that remembers feeling fully, one that still aches, but without the words to prove it. People think numbness is peace. They envy the calm. But numbness is not peace. It's paralysis. It's emotion so deep, so overfull, that your system shuts down to protect you from it. It's the brain pulling the emergency brake on your soul, locking your feelings in a vault just so you can keep functioning. Because sometimes, the only thing more dangerous than feeling pain is feeling all of it at once. You wake up, and the sun doesn't matter. Music sounds like noise. Food tastes like cardboard. Laughter feels rehearsed. You smile because people expect it. You reply to messages out of obligation, not connection. You survive, not by fighting, but by fading. You disappear in plain sight, and no one notices because on the outside, you look okay. But inside, you feel every ghost, every memory, every almost tear that didn't fall. Every moment you wanted to scream, but swallowed it. You feel the itch of what's missing, the shape of what you've lost. You feel the absence of feeling like a weight pressing against your ribs, and still, you say nothing. Because there's nothing to explain. And that's what makes it worse. This is not depression the way people imagine it. It's not crying in a dark room. It's staring at a wall for hours, unable to move. It's replying, "I'm fine," not because it's true, but because the alternative would take too many words, too much energy, too much self you don't have left to give. It's watching your life play out in front of you like a film, where you're not the lead. You're the observer, present but invisible, alive but unreachable. And yet, despite all of this, you still feel. That's the curse. You feel the time passing, the silence growing louder, the way the room changes when someone walks in, the way your chest tightens when you remember a time you weren't like this. You feel that. Even when you can't feel anything else. You feel the memory of emotion, the phantom limb of joy. You feel it all, through the numbness. It's easy to shame yourself in this state, to think you're lazy, cold, ungrateful. You say things like, "Other people have it worse. Why can't I just snap out of it?" But numbness isn't a failure. It's a symptom of burnout, of trauma, of emotional overload. It's the result of carrying more than your nervous system was designed to hold, without ever setting it down. And eventually, the system goes offline, not to destroy you, but to save you. But survival is not the same as healing. And healing doesn't mean you suddenly feel everything again. It means sitting beside your numbness and whispering, "You don't scare me." It means letting a little warmth in, even if it's just the comfort of a blanket. It means accepting that you are in winter now, but spring is possible. It means reaching for connection, not because you feel like it, but because part of you remembers that once it mattered. You won't feel nothing forever. The system comes back online, slowly, unpredictably, sometimes in tiny bursts, like a song that hits harder than it should, a memory that breaks through, a moment of laughter that feels suspiciously real. Those are signals, signs that your emotional self is thawing, that the fire inside you isn't gone, it's just been buried under the snow. You are not broken. You are healing. You are not empty. You are resting. You are not lost. You are returning. Even numb, you are feeling. Even frozen, you are burning. Even silent, you are still here. Glitched moments that repeat. You felt it before. That strange second when something replays, not in memory, but in real time. A phrase is spoken again, exactly the same way. A stranger passes twice, in the same clothes, same direction, too close together to be coincidence. A second feels stretched, thick, like reality hesitated, and then continued. Your mind twitches. Your stomach flips. But instead of saying, "Something is broken," you say, "That was weird." Because we're trained not to see the glitch. We live in a world where consistency is assumed. We don't question the air we breathe, the floor we walk on, the seconds that tick forward in linear order. But sometimes, the system skips. The loop reveals itself. And for a fleeting instant, you're not in the world. You're watching it render. Psychologists call it jamais vu, the eerie opposite of déjà vu. It's when something familiar suddenly feels unfamiliar. But what if it's not just your brain being strange? What if it's the system slipping? We've all had those moments. You're in a conversation and someone says something, then a moment later, they say the exact same thing. Same tone, same expression. You look around, no one else reacts. Was it a replay? A stutter? Did your mind jump? Or did reality lag? You try to shake it off, because calling it a glitch makes you sound insane. So you say, "That was odd." You force a smile. But deep down, a question lingers. Was that supposed to happen? Then there are the faces. The stranger you saw on the subway last week, now standing behind you in a grocery store 2 cities away. Not similar. Identical. Or the car that drives by, again and again. Same dent in the fender, same license plate. Every time you check the clock at 3:33. A coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the variables in your simulation are reusing assets. Think about a video game. Background characters, procedural weather, AI loops. When the system needs to conserve energy, it reuses, it replays, it scripts. Now zoom out. If this reality is a simulation, something many physicists admit is a legitimate possibility, then what are those moments we call glitches? Not proof, but hints, echoes, overlaps, places where the pattern failed to fully reset. Your brain is a filter. It keeps you sane by ignoring anomalies. It sees a glitch, and instead of alerting you, it files it under weird, harmless, forgettable. But what if that's the problem? What if we've been conditioned to explain away the cracks? The dream that repeats, the face you've never seen in waking life, but appears every night for weeks, the sound of footsteps when you're alone, the light flicker synced with your thoughts. Tiny events dismissed as quirks, but each one chips away at the illusion. And sometimes the glitches stack. You think, didn't this already happen? And it has. Not just as déjà vu, but exactly. A conversation you remember not just in feeling, but in content. You say, I knew you'd say that. Not as a guess, but with certainty. Not psychic, not prophecy, just a loop. Some people experience what's called time slips. Moments where time seems to pause, or reverse, or repeat. A second that lasts forever. A minute that seems to vanish. You check your phone. 2 hours passed. You don't remember them. Or you live through the same awkward moment twice. Not similar, identical. And yet, there's no record. No proof. Just a gut feeling. That wasn't right. But the scariest part isn't the glitch. It's your brain's refusal to let you believe it. Because to truly believe you're in a simulation, to really accept that what you see, touch, and trust might be rendered in real time and occasionally fail, is too much. It unravels everything. And so, we shrug. We say, that's strange. Then we go back to work. Back to scrolling. Back to sleep. But what if we didn't shrug? What if we started mapping the moments, the repeating seconds, the misplaced people, the thoughts that sync with the world outside? What if, instead of burying them under routine, we looked them in the eye and said, I see you? Maybe then the system would show more. Maybe the glitches are not accidents. Maybe they're invitations. Maybe they are the only clues left behind by something bigger, something watching, or something forgotten. Maybe they are fingerprints of the architects. Maybe they're breadcrumbs. Or maybe they're tests to see who's still paying attention. So, the next time your reality stutters, don't look away. Don't dismiss it. Stop. Breathe. Watch. Because you might be witnessing the code misfire. And in that misfire, there might be something truer than anything you've ever seen. You live inside a loop. And sometimes, the loop slips. And when it does, your soul feels it, even if your mind denies it. And maybe, just maybe, what you call weird was never wrong. Searching that creates distance. You're searching for truth, for meaning, for something that makes this life more than random days passing into silence. You read, you wander, you ask questions no one can answer. You feel like you're getting closer, but somehow you're not. Because every time you reach out for meaning, it steps back. Every time you think you're on the verge of discovering something profound, something that will finally make sense of it all, it dissolves into more questions. The harder you search, the farther it gets. It's like chasing your reflection in a lake. The moment you dive in to touch it, the water breaks, and there's nothing there. This is the trap. Meaning doesn't disappear because it's cruel. It disappears because the search itself changes the shape of what you're looking for. You don't just look for meaning, you create the distance by looking. You introduce the void by demanding something to fill it. It's like trying to fall asleep by trying to fall asleep. The effort ruins the outcome. The more you want it, the more awake you become. The more you search for why, the more the world feels like a place where meaning should exist, but doesn't. And in that gap between expectation and silence, your longing grows. You're not lost in the absence of answers. You're lost in the echo of your own questions. And it hurts. Because when the world feels empty, searching gives you purpose. It feels noble, spiritual, intellectual. You tell yourself, if I just think deeply enough, if I go far enough, if I break myself open enough, I'll find it. But what if the very act of searching is what blinds you? What if you're digging a hole and wondering why the light keeps fading? There's a paradox no one warns you about. The deeper you think, the more aware you become of how little you understand. That's the curse of intelligence. You develop tools sharp enough to dissect reality, but never sharp enough to repair it. You cut into the fabric of existence, hoping to find the thread that explains everything. But you just find more seams, more layers, more silence. This isn't failure. It's structure. Meaning hides in the search. Not because it's cruel, but because it's not a thing to be held. It's an emergent property. It's not behind the curtain. It is the curtain. And the moment you try to tear it down, you lose what you were hoping to reveal. Take someone obsessed with the meaning of love. They question every heartbeat, analyze every glance, turn every feeling into theory. And in doing so, they kill the thing they're trying to understand. Love, when dissected, stops breathing. The warmth becomes data. The mystery becomes confusion. And the magic dies under the microscope. It happens in religion, in science, in relationships, in self-discovery. The seeker becomes lost, not because they failed, but because they mistook the act of searching for a path toward arrival. But meaning isn't a destination. It's not hidden in a cave or locked in a book. It's not waiting at the end of a 5-year journey or behind the final page of a spiritual text. It lives in the spaces you pass by without questioning. Sometimes meaning is a friend's laugh over coffee, a dog tilting its head at you, a morning where you wake up and realize you didn't need to solve anything. You just needed to feel alive. But we miss that because we're busy seeking the absolute, the grand answer, the why behind everything. We think if we stop searching, we'll fall into despair, but maybe it's the search that creates the despair. Maybe your questions aren't revealing the void. They're building it. You weren't born with emptiness. You were born into it. And the moment you were told that life had to have purpose, that everything needed to mean something, that's the moment you became hollow. The truth is, most of us aren't searching for meaning. We're searching for certainty. We want something to rest on. Something that says, this pain mattered, or this joy wasn't random. But life doesn't hand that out. It offers moments, fragments, impressions, and we turn them into stories because we need to. But those stories aren't reality. They're yours. You wrote them. And the more you chase after a meaning written by someone else, a religion, a philosophy, a guru, a theory, the more you abandon the one story that can never be replaced, your own. And maybe that's the only meaning that matters. Not the universal, not the perfect, just yours. Not because it's correct, but because it's lived, and living something, truly feeling it without tearing it apart for analysis. That's when the void closes, not when you find an answer, but when you stop needing one. Think of the stars. We look at them and we ask, why? Why are we here? Why does this exist? But the stars don't ask that. They just burn. They just are. And somehow, their silence is more honest than all our philosophies combined. So what if you stopped asking? Not forever, not as surrender, but as a shift. What if instead of searching for meaning, you started building it? What if you lived in a way that made the question irrelevant? Maybe then, the distance would collapse. Maybe then, you'd wake up and realize the void you kept trying to fill was never empty. It was waiting. Not for your questions, but for your presence. And maybe, just maybe, the moment you stopped chasing meaning is the moment it found you. Fixing what wasn't broken, you fixed everything. You optimized your habits, decluttered your space, cut off the toxic people, followed the healing podcasts, made peace with your past, built routines that would impress any therapist. You did everything right. Everything modern healing tells you to do. And yet, somewhere in all this perfection, you feel hollow. Not broken, just uncertain, like you traded a chaotic, emotional life for a quiet, sterile one. Like you solved every visible problem, but lost something invisible in the process. This is the paradox of fixing what wasn't broken, of looking so deeply into yourself that you began to diagnose every mess as trauma, every sadness as dysfunction, every misstep as a symptom to correct. You healed the noise, but also silenced the music. You polished your inner world until it gleamed, only to find your reflection missing. And now you wake up, not in crisis, but in confusion. Everything is technically fine. You're safe, you're stable, you're functional, but nothing quite feels like home. Before the healing, before the rewiring, before the self-work, there was a version of you that felt things more recklessly, that cried harder, laughed louder, trusted faster, loved in ways that didn't always make sense, but made you feel alive. That version of you was messy, but they were you. And somewhere along the path to improvement, they were labeled dysfunctional, so you buried them. You buried the parts of you that didn't align with the new, refined model, the one with better boundaries, the one with less drama, the one who no longer texts first or waits up for people who don't value them. But now you're wondering, was that really healing? Or was that erasure? You fixed the sadness, but did you kill the joy in the process? You learned to protect yourself so well that even you can't reach certain parts of your own heart anymore. You're armored against disappointment, but also against spontaneity, against intimacy, against the raw, unfiltered moments that make life feel real. It's easy to confuse growth with disappearance, to think you've matured because you're quieter now, more composed, more controlled, but sometimes control is just another cage, a prettier one you build yourself so that no one else can hurt you. But inside it, you start to forget what your uncaged voice sounded like. You begin to ask, was I ever truly broken, or just different from what the world wanted me to be? Improvement culture doesn't talk about this enough. The grief that comes from letting go of your past self. The confusion of realizing you've outgrown a pain, but also outgrown a joy that used to come with it. Maybe the way you used to obsess over love was unhealthy, but it also made you feel connected, alive, romantic. Maybe the way you used to talk too much in groups was a defense mechanism, but it also made people laugh, made rooms warmer. In fixing your wounds, you lost some of your weird, and that weirdness was part of your soul. Now, your life looks good from the outside, but you don't feel like you live inside it. You float through days, you tick off checklists, you tell yourself, I should be happy. I've done the work. But healing doesn't always mean happiness. Sometimes it just means silence, stillness, absence. And the absence can be unnerving, because before you had chaos, you had emotions that ran wild. Now you have peace, but it's so quiet it feels like nothing. You were told that healing would make you whole, but no one warned you that it might also make you different, unrecognizable, that it might require you to say goodbye, not just to pain, but to the person you were when you carried it. And sometimes, you miss them. You miss the fire, you miss the irrational hope. You miss being someone who needed, because needing made you feel human. You've become so good at avoiding what once hurt you that you've also stopped reaching for what used to move you. You say no quicker now, you leave sooner. You read red flags like a prophet. But in that swiftness, you may have stopped letting people in long enough to show they're not a flag at all. You're not cold, you're cautious. But even caution becomes its own form of distance. A safe house with no windows, a peace with no view. So what now? If nothing is wrong but nothing feels right, where do you go? Maybe the answer isn't more fixing. Maybe it's unfixing. Maybe you revisit some of the broken places and let them stay cracked a little. Let light come through. Let mess exist. Let joy be irrational again. You don't have to destroy what you've built, but you can soften it. Add warmth back into your boundaries. Add curiosity back into your conversations. Let the healed version of you meet the forgotten version and ask, what did I lose while trying to get better? Because healing isn't about turning yourself into a machine that never malfunctions. It's about remembering that you're a person, complex, contradictory, capable of growth and regression. Wholeness isn't the absence of brokenness. It's the courage to hold your chaos and your calm in the same hand. To remember that some of the best parts of you were never problems. They were just parts you hadn't fully understood yet. You don't have to go back, but you don't have to keep pretending that forward is always the right direction either. Sometimes healing means remembering. And remembering means recognizing that the version of you that felt too much, wanted too much, tried too hard, that version wasn't broken. They were alive. Maybe you don't need to fix anything else. Maybe you just need to feel again. even if it's messy, even if it hurts, because a life without friction isn't peace, it's distance, and you deserve more than just a life that looks good. You deserve one that feels like yours. Loved but misunderstood. You're surrounded by people. They smile when they see you. They call you kind, strong, talented. They say you're easy to be around, easy to admire, and somewhere in that, there should be warmth. There should be comfort. But instead, there's a distance, because while they love you, they don't really know you. And the parts of you that stay hidden, those deep, twisted, aching parts, they never enter the room. So you smile back. You say thank you, and you feel completely alone. Then there are the others, the ones who do see you, who catch the darkness in your eyes, who understand what keeps you up at night, who recognize the real weight you carry beneath your jokes, your silence, your ambition. But they don't stay. They don't choose you. They name the truth, and then they walk away from it. From you. So now you live in the in-between. Loved, but misunderstood. Known, but unloved. And neither place feels like home. You start asking questions you can't answer. Would they still love me if they knew everything? Would they still stay if I stopped curating myself? Am I lovable for who I am? Or just for the version I've built? Because you've learned how to be liked. You know how to shape yourself into what's wanted. You know what to say, how to say it. You know how to be gentle, helpful, agreeable. You know how to survive through charm. But deep down, you're exhausted. Because no one sees the version of you who breaks, who doubts, who rages, who cries in silence because even your pain feels inconvenient. And the truth that gnaws at you is this: love that doesn't know the real you never fully lands. And truth that isn't loved cuts even deeper. You want to be seen without being left. You want to be chosen without having to disappear. You want to be loved, not in pieces, not in performance, but in your raw, messy, full complexity. But every time you try to show that version, people flinch, or fade, or fumble their way into misunderstanding. So you retreat, you smile again, you nod, you play the part. Because being seen and rejected hurts more than being invisible. At least invisibility feels safe. But the ache doesn't leave. It grows. Because the heart wasn't made to be edited, and the soul can only stay in hiding for so long. So what do? You stop chasing love that doesn't ask to know you. You stop proving your worth to people who love your mask. You stop shrinking yourself to fit their comfort. And you start telling the truth. Slowly, carefully. You test the ground. You speak the darker thoughts. You admit the parts that feel unlovable. You let yourself be real, even if it costs you admiration. Because being loved for who you're not is a kind of loneliness no crowd can fix. And yes, some people will leave. Some people only want the shine, the ease, the version of you that makes their world softer. Let them go. Because the ones who matter will stay. The ones who truly love will lean in. And they won't run from your depth. They'll sit inside it with you. They'll say, I see you, not just the good, not just the bright. I see it all, and I'm not afraid. That kind of love doesn't come quickly, it doesn't come often, but it exists, and you'll never find it while pretending. You'll only find it when you stop performing and start revealing. When you stop managing people's perception of you and start living your truth, unfiltered. That's when love becomes real. Not just a feeling, but a home. Overthinking the soul. You want to understand. That's all you ever wanted. To know why you feel what you feel. To trace the origin of every ache, every fear, every flicker of joy before it dies. You dig and dig and dig, through memory, through logic, through the ruins of past conversations, and you call it healing. You call it self-awareness. But something strange happens along the way. You stop feeling. You start analyzing instead. Grief becomes data. Love becomes theory. Anger becomes a case study. And you become a surgeon with a scalpel pressed against your own soul, hoping if you cut deep enough, you'll finally find peace. But instead of clarity, you find distance. You watch your emotions like a scientist staring at something in a glass cage. You write about them. You talk about them. You explain them so well, others mistake you for being in touch with yourself. But you're not in touch. You're in observation. Detached. Split. Somewhere between your body and your mind, a bridge collapsed. And now, All you can do is point at the ruins and say, "See, that's where I hurt." This is the curse of overthinking the soul, when intellect replaces instinct, when you turn inward not to live, but to label. You don't say, "I'm sad." You say, "This is likely a trauma response rooted in childhood rejection." You don't cry. You identify the exact moment in your developmental timeline when vulnerability became dangerous. You know everything about your feelings, except how to actually feel them. And at first, it feels like power, like progress, like control. You can outmaneuver triggers, outsmart grief, outthink your way around love's messy edges. But slowly, it stops working. Because emotions don't want to be solved. They want to be felt. They want to move through you like weather, not be captured, dissected, and pinned like dead butterflies to the walls of your mind. But you can't stop. Not now. Not after how far you've gone. You've built an entire identity around being self-aware. You've read the books, written the journals, rewritten the narratives. You've sat in therapy rooms and explained your pain with beautiful precision. People praise your insight, your composure, your wisdom. No one sees the numbness underneath. No one sees that somewhere along the way, your emotional body became a theory you can't climb back into. And so, now you live with this unbearable question. What happens when you know why you feel, but can't feel it anymore? It's like standing in a museum of your own life. Every moment behind glass, labeled, categorized. Here is where I felt abandonment. Here is when I first learned to people please. Here is my fear of intimacy, explained in 3 tidy paragraphs. You are so damn clear and so heartbreakingly disconnected. You want to scream, but you won't. You'll analyze the urge instead. You'll wonder where the scream comes from, what it means, how long it's been building, what inner child it belongs to. You'll do anything but scream, because feeling without understanding now terrifies you. You've been burned before. You've felt too much, been ruled by emotion. Let love turn into obsession. Let sadness sink into collapse. And so, you learn to protect yourself by turning pain into puzzles, passion into process. You thought you were healing, but really, you were building a fortress, and now you can't find the door. The truth is, overthinking is a trauma response, a clever one, a way to gain control when life felt unsafe, a way to turn chaos into sense. But survival isn't the same as living, and the part of you that once needed to overanalyze everything, it's not gone, it's just lonely. It's waiting for permission to stop performing intelligence and start allowing emotion. But how? You begin by not knowing. You let yourself feel badly without tracing it to an origin. You cry and resist the urge to explain why. You say, "I'm angry," without justifying it. You say, "I'm scared," without needing a diagram. You become messy, cracked, real, and that is terrifying. For someone who learned that being understood was the only path to safety, but feeling without control is safety. Because it means you've stopped watching yourself from outside. It means the soul is being allowed to breathe again, not as a theory, but as a body. It will be slow. You'll relapse into thought. You'll analyze a feeling seconds after it arrives. But with practice, you'll learn to pause, to name without explaining, to feel without framing, to exist without needing a reason. And slowly you'll return, not to the person you were before, but to the person you would have been if you'd been allowed to feel without shame, to live without the constant burden of self-surveillance, to be more than a mind explaining itself in circles. You'll start trusting instinct again. You'll remember what it means to laugh without commentary, to cry without apology, to love without dissection. And the soul, your soul, will no longer be something to solve. It will be something you live from, escaping through walls you built. You cry for escape. You plead for a door, a window, a crack in the wall. But what if the wall is yours? What if the prison you're stuck in is made of your own design? Most cages don't come with bars. They come with beliefs, stories, fears disguised as rules. You repeat them every day. I can't do that. That's just who I am. It's too late for me. You say these things so often they become architecture. And before you know it, you're trapped inside a structure you spent years building. Brick by brick, lie by lie, all in the name of safety. It didn't start as a prison. It started as protection. Maybe you were hurt, betrayed, mocked for being too much or not enough. So you told yourself, don't speak too loudly, don't trust too easily, don't dream too big. At the time, these rules felt like armor. They kept you from further damage. They made you small enough to survive. And back then, survival was the victory. But you didn't stop building. Even when the danger passed, you kept laying bricks. Don't try unless you're perfect. Don't hope unless it's guaranteed. Don't love unless you're certain you won't be left. These became law. And over time, the armor became a coffin. Not made of steel or stone, but of doubt, shame, and carefulness. A cage of your own making. And here's the cruel twist. Because you built it, it feels familiar, safe, even holy. You mistake the voice in your head for truth because it sounds like you. But it isn't. It's a ghost. A leftover whisper from when you were hurting. And now it plays on repeat. Stay small. Stay silent. Stay safe. And you obey, thinking it's wisdom, when really, it's just fear in disguise. So now you beg for freedom. You scream at the universe, at the sky, at fate itself. Let me out! But the exit isn't locked. It's hidden. Not outside, but within. Freedom won't come through breaking walls. It comes through unlearning them, because the rules that hold you are not facts. They're decisions you forgot you made. You decided that you weren't worthy. You decided that failure was fatal. You decided that rejection meant you should stop trying. And maybe those decisions made sense once. But do they still? Or are you clinging to broken logic because you're too afraid to see what's beyond the walls? And here's the part no one tells you. Escaping your cage will hurt. Because the moment you step out, everything you blamed, your past, your parents, your circumstances, fades. And what's left is you. No more excuses, no more armor, just the terrifying responsibility of being free. Freedom means risk. Freedom means vulnerability. Freedom means not knowing who you are without the pain. And sometimes, staying trapped feels easier than answering that question. But you cannot evolve if you refuse to let go of the version of you that needed the cage. That version kept you alive, but it cannot carry you forward. So look at your life. What rules are you following that no one ever gave you? What fears have you mistaken for truth? What lies have you told yourself so often they became scripture? And most importantly, who would you be without them? You think the wall is there to keep danger out, but maybe it's keeping you from the life you're meant to live. A life where you speak without shrinking. A life where you love without calculation. A life where your voice, your power, your desires are not just allowed, but required. But first, you have to let go. Let go of the identity that clings to suffering. Let go of the script that says you can't. Let go of the voice that only knows how to protect, so it never learned how to live. You were not born in a cage. You built it, which means you can unbuild it. One belief at a time, one risk at a time, one brave moment of defiance where you say, no more. And in that moment, the wall begins to crack, the light comes in, the air changes, and you realize freedom was never a door someone else had to open. It was a wall you had to stop believing in. Choices that didn't count. You did everything right. You calculated. You weighed your options. You chose with integrity, with intelligence, with care, and still, it fell apart. You got hurt. They left. It failed. And you were left standing in the rubble of a life you tried so hard to build on logic, wondering, what was the point? That's the moment no one prepares you for. The moment you realize that doing the right thing doesn't guarantee the right outcome, that the universe isn't a ledger balancing your choices against your rewards. It doesn't hand out victories based on your effort. It doesn't follow fairness. It flips a coin behind your back and tells you the result after you've committed everything. And somehow, that hurts more than failure, because failure you can blame on mistakes, on recklessness, on ignorance. But this was your best. And it wasn't enough. You made the smart move, the kind move, the selfless move, and still the world turned the other way. That's a different kind of pain. One that doesn't just bruise your heart. It fractures your belief in cause and effect. You begin to wonder if you have any control at all, if free will is real, or just the illusion of steering a ship that was always going to crash. You remember the job you turned down because it felt dishonest, only to watch someone else lie their way into success. You remember the friend you protected at your own expense, only for them to disappear the moment they didn't need you. You remember the lover you stayed loyal to, only to discover they'd left you emotionally long before they left you physically. And in each case, you made the right choice. The noble choice. The one that aligned with your values. But the outcome didn't care. So now, the question haunts you. What's the point of choosing right if it doesn't change anything? Here's the brutal truth. The universe doesn't reward you for choosing wisely. It doesn't punish you for being selfish. It moves by its own laws, chaotic, random, unfeeling. You made the right move. The universe flipped a coin. You lost. And yet, you still have to live with the consequences. That's the trap. You carry the cost of a decision that never gave you its promised return. You sacrificed something real for an ideal, and now you wonder if the ideal was ever real at all. It shakes your faith, in justice, in strategy, in yourself. You start to doubt your instincts. Maybe you should have been colder, sharper. Maybe kindness was a weakness. Maybe caution was cowardice. And that spiral, that slow erosion of identity, is what turns survivors into cynics. But here's what no one tells you. The point of making the right choice was never the outcome. It was you. The choice didn't fail. The outcome did. And the difference matters. Because every time you chose with courage, with clarity, with conviction, you were becoming someone. Someone who can live with their reflection. Someone who didn't bend just because the reward was uncertain. Someone who can stand in the wreckage and say, I did not betray myself. That doesn't fix the pain, but it keeps you whole. And that wholeness, it's the one thing chaos can't steal from you. Think of it like this. You are not just building a life. You are building a self. And that self is shaped in the moments when the world doesn't respond the way you want it to. When it tests your resolve. When it strips away the illusion that logic always wins and asks, will you still be who you say you are, even when there's no reward? Most people won't. They'll switch, adapt, harden. Because it's easier to play the game if you stop caring about how the game changes you. But not you. You still cared. You chose the honest path when the easy one was wide open. You stayed when you could have run. You loved when it hurt. You gave when no one clapped. And that might not buy you fortune, or fame, or even peace. But it means something. It means you're real. Because in a world where even the most perfect plan can fail, the only thing you can ever fully own is how you chose. And yes, the universe might still flip the coin. And yes, it might land against you again. But that doesn't make your choice meaningless. It makes it yours. You weren't playing to win. You were playing to be true. And that kind of truth, it survives the loss. It grows in the ruins. It becomes the one thread of meaning when everything else falls away. So next time, when the outcome doesn't match the effort, when the choice costs you more than it rewards you, remember this. You didn't fail. You refused to disappear in the face of chaos. You chose. And that choice still counts, even when the world says it didn't. Doors that don't exist. You keep searching for a way out, a crack in the wall, a door you missed, a hidden passage that will finally lead you beyond this feeling, this life, this version of yourself that always seems just slightly wrong. You scroll endlessly. You make plans. You fantasize about disappearing, about starting over, about waking up as someone new in a different reality where you don't carry the same thoughts, the same past, the same ache. And every time life becomes too tight, too loud, too heavy, your mind runs to escape, not to fix, to flee. But here's the question. What if there is no way out? What if the place you're trying to escape from isn't the world, but your own mind? What if all the running you've done, all the reinventions, the cities, the relationships, the identities, what if they were all just different hallways in the same house? You change the wallpaper, but the walls remain. You open doors, but they lead to different versions of the same room. Because the discomfort isn't external, it's existential. There's a terrifying freedom in realizing this, that no matter where you go, you bring yourself. Your mind, your memory, your mechanisms. You are the constant. And so, the illusion of escape becomes a loop of movement disguised as progress. But at some point, you stop and ask, what am I even trying to escape? And the answer is this: a feeling you never learned to sit with, a silence you were taught to fear, a truth that's too still, too final to bear, that there is no out, there is only in. Because here's the secret, the door you keep looking for doesn't exist. There is no exit from consciousness, no fire escape from selfhood. You can distract, you can numb, you can pretend you've transcended, but at the end of every path, you meet yourself again, older, tired, still searching, and eventually you ask, what if I stopped looking for the way out and started listening to what's inside? That shift is brutal. It shatters illusions. It collapses the fantasy that if you just try harder, wait longer, evolve more, you'll finally arrive somewhere better. You won't, because there is no final destination. There's only the realization that you're already here, and this moment, this mind, this self, is the only thing that ever was. You are not trapped. You are simply awake in a reality that never promised escape. We are conditioned to seek exits. It's human. From childhood, we're told the bad feelings should be solved, that sadness means something's wrong, that discomfort means something's broken. So we scan life like a maze, constantly asking, where's the next step? But what if the maze has no exit because it was never a maze? What if the only trap was the belief that you needed to get somewhere else? Look around. Really look. Are you trapped? Or are you refusing to inhabit the only space that's ever truly been yours? Your mind, your breath, your awareness. You want to escape your thoughts, but you are your thoughts. You want to leave your past behind, but your past lives in your nervous system, your responses, your worldview. You can't run from your story. You can only reread it until it no longer owns you. Acceptance is the key. Not the passive kind that gives up, but the radical kind that stops demanding different circumstances in order to feel peace. It's not about becoming okay with pain. It's about realizing that your resistance to pain is where most of the suffering lives. You think you're suffocating in your life, but what's choking you is the belief that you shouldn't be here, that you should have found the door by now, that you're late to a destination that doesn't exist. Some people search for decades. They move cities, change jobs, end relationships, shave their heads, travel, meditate, pray, and still, they wake up in the same skin with the same ache. Because the door was never out there. It was never a portal to another life. It was a threshold within, a point where you stop running and start asking the question, what if I stay? What if I stop trying to escape myself? This doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in, to presence, to breathe, to the terrifying simplicity of now, and in that stillness, something happens. You begin to notice what you were too busy to feel, the grief that was never cried, the tension your body normalized, the quiet hunger for gentleness that achievement never fed. You stop reaching, and you start receiving. The paradox is cruel. The exit you've always wanted was never real, but the moment you stop looking for it, you feel free. Not because the walls disappeared, but because you stopped believing they were prisons. You realized they were just boundaries, containers, shapes, and inside those shapes, you are allowed to exist without needing to fix, change, or escape. This is what peace actually feels like. Not dramatic, not euphoric, not cinematic, but quiet, still, ordinary, and terrifying at first. Because when you're not escaping, you're just there, naked in the mirror, breathing in a room with no trap door. But slowly that presence becomes home, and you realize you weren't seeking freedom. You were running from it. You were terrified of being fully present, because presence makes you responsible for your experience. But now you know, the doors don't exist. There is no escape hatch from being alive, but there is release. And it doesn't come from leaving. It comes from staying, from listening, from surrendering to the truth that this is your mind, your life, your moment, and that's all there ever was. And maybe that's enough. Boxes you labeled wrong. You told yourself who you were. Long ago, you picked a label, a dream, a definition, and you stuck with it. You were the smart one, the loyal one, the achiever, the rebel, the quiet one, the caretaker, the fighter, the artist. You gave yourself a name because you thought you needed one, because everyone else seemed to have theirs, because the world doesn't know what to do with people who haven't defined themselves. So, you built your boxes carefully, lovingly. You wrote your rules, your goals. You made checklists that looked like freedom. And for a while, they worked. The structure felt safe, predictable, understood. You knew what to say, who to be. You could point at your life and say, "This is who I am." But then something cracked. It wasn't loud. It didn't happen all at once. It was quiet. A slow ache, a growing sense of misalignment. One morning, the label felt too tight. The role felt hollow. The dream felt heavy. You looked at the boxes you built and realized you couldn't breathe inside them anymore. But by then, you had already decorated them. You had convinced people this was you, and maybe you had convinced yourself too. So instead of leaving, you shrank. You tried to make yourself fit the box again. You doubled down on the story. You reminded yourself why you started. You told yourself it was just a phase, just fear, just fatigue. But it wasn't. It was truth. The truth that you labeled your life too early, that the version of love you chased no longer holds you, that the career you sacrificed everything for no longer excites you, that the identity you've worn like armor no longer reflects who you've become. And now, you're stuck. Not because you failed, but because you've outgrown the things you once needed. You don't hate them. You just don't fit them anymore. And it's terrifying. Because if you're not that person, then who are you? This is the part no one prepares you for. That growth sometimes looks like betrayal. That healing sometimes feels like destruction. That changing your mind feels like breaking your promise to yourself. But the real betrayal is staying trapped in a story that no longer feels true. You are allowed to rewrite your definitions. You are allowed to change what love means to you, what success looks like, what identity you answer to. You are allowed to say, "I was wrong about what I thought I wanted." That doesn't make you weak. That makes you alive. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who cling to old blueprints. They're the ones who stand in the ruins of their own certainty and build again. You are not obligated to remain the person you were when you were trying to survive. You don't have to keep living in a box just because you once built it for safety. You can leave. You can change. You can start over, even if people don't understand. Even if you don't fully understand yourself yet. That's not failure. That's freedom. But first, you have to grieve it. The version of yourself you worked so hard to become. The boxes you labeled with such care. The roles that kept you grounded when you had no center. Let them go. And then, let yourself be confused. Let yourself wander. Let yourself become without having to explain. You are not a brand, not a headline, not a set of bullet points. You are a living process, a shifting landscape, a question in motion. And the labels you gave yourself when you were younger were not mistakes. They were stepping stones, not prisons. So, peel them off. The ones that say, "This is what love is." The ones that say, "This is who I am." The ones that say, "This is how success is supposed to feel." If they no longer serve you, they are not sacred. Because the only label that matters now is this: becoming. Seen too late, you tried. You tried so hard to be what they needed. You bent, you softened, you broke and rebuilt yourself with quieter pieces. You swallowed your truth, dimmed your light, wore the skin they liked best. And just when you finally became the version of you that could have been enough, they stopped looking. They moved on, turned their back, forgot your name. And now you're standing in the spotlight, glowing, growing, beautiful in a way they never believed you could be. And there's no one left to clap. This is seen too late, the cruel ache of being recognized only in absence, of becoming everything someone asked for, after they no longer care to see it. It's not about bitterness. It's about timing, about silence, about the way a heart can still whisper, "Look at me now," even when it knows no one is listening. You weren't always like this. There was a version of you, raw, unfinished, desperate to be chosen. You wore your emotions like open wounds and waited for someone to call that beautiful. Instead, they pointed out the mess, the flaws, the ways you fell short. So you changed. You hardened your edges. You studied their preferences like scripture. You became strategic with your words, careful with your love, measured with your dreams. Not out of deception, but hope. Hope that if you got it right, they'd stay. But they didn't. They left during the draft, before the final edit. before the masterpiece revealed itself. They walked out when you were still learning how to stand, and now that you can run, fly, burn brighter than ever, they're gone. And the applause you imagined? It never comes. There's a particular kind of grief that lives here. It's not just the loss of a person, it's the loss of being witnessed by them, of wanting so badly for them to see how far you've come, to turn around just once and say, "I was wrong. You became everything I never stayed long enough to believe you could be." But they don't, and they won't, because the story you wrote to win them back was never going to be read. You shine now in an empty room, and yet, still, you shine. That's the unbearable beauty of it. You're better now, not in spite of them, but because of what their absence forced you to face. You learned to validate yourself when their praise disappeared. You learned to heal yourself when their touch stopped coming. You learned to rebuild without an audience, to grow without permission. And maybe that growth was fueled by heartbreak. Maybe the fire in your chest was lit by rejection, but the light it gave off is real. Still, the ache remains. You pass places that remind you of who you were back then. You remember conversations where you begged, silently or out loud, to be enough. And now, knowing you are, the memory becomes heavier, not lighter, because no one from that time gets to see it. They remember the struggle, the chaos, the half-formed dream, but not the result. They stopped watching before the miracle, and that hurts. It hurts when the people who doubted you don't get proven wrong to their faces, when they don't get to eat their words, or regret their silence, or feel even a fraction of what you felt when they let go. It hurts because you wanted your healing to be noticed, your glow to be received. You wanted the applause, the closure, the final act where you walk out victorious, and they sit in the front row with nothing left to say. But real healing doesn't wait for witnesses. Real transformation happens when you stop performing, when you stop needing your growth to be seen in order to feel valid, when you stop trying to reverse time to earn the approval of ghosts, and you realize it's not their gaze that made you valuable. It never was. You were always worthy, even when you were messy, even when you were lost, even when they couldn't see it. You're not shining for them anymore. You're shining because that's who you are now. And maybe no one from your past is clapping. Maybe the silence echoes louder than their praise ever would have. But someone else is watching now. You. The present you. The one who remembers the nights you didn't think you'd make it. The one who stayed. Who kept going. Who rebuilt from ash. That's who this version is for. You don't need to be seen by those who abandoned the journey. You need to be seen by the one who survived it. And if that's all there is, it's enough. Meaning that changes itself. You spend your life chasing meaning. You ask why. You ask how. You look for purpose in books, in love, in pain, in silence. And just when you think you've found it, just when the answer sharpens into focus, it slips, fades, mutates. The meaning you saw so clearly becomes something else. Not wrong, just out of reach. And so, the search begins again. This is the paradox no one prepares you for. Meaning is not a destination. It's a mirage. The closer you get, the more it changes. You thought the breakup was to teach you strength, but later, you see it taught you tenderness. You thought the failure was punishment. But years on, you realize it redirected your entire path. You thought you understood your grief until it transformed into gratitude, then guilt, then numbness, then love again. Meaning doesn't stay still. It grows with you. Or maybe it plays with you. Maybe it doesn't want to be held. Maybe it wants to be followed. Like a shadow that dances just beyond the edge of understanding. Your mind craves stability. It wants stories that stay true. But the truth is liquid. A memory changes every time you touch it. A lesson deepens every time you revisit it. The events of your life don't change, but their meaning does. Not because reality is broken, but because you are. You are not one person. You are 1,000 versions across time. The you that was shattered by rejection is not the you that now walks through loneliness like a seasoned traveler. The you that once begged for answers now sees beauty in questions. And so, of course, your meaning changes, because the one interpreting it has changed. But we don't like that. We want answers that last forever. We want purpose we can hold, frame, tattoo on our souls. something final, something solid. But meaning doesn't obey your need for permanence. It isn't interested in certainty. It only wants to be witnessed for a moment. Then it moves on. And when it does, you feel betrayed. You say, I thought I understood. I thought this mattered. I thought this pain had a reason. But maybe the reason wasn't static. Maybe it's unfolding. Maybe your mistake wasn't misunderstanding. It was assuming meaning could ever be complete. Think about it. When have you ever understood something fully in real time? The heartbreak only made sense years later. The breakdown revealed its gift after it ended. The trauma, the silence, the missed opportunity, they felt like chaos until one day, they didn't. Meaning didn't arrive with the event, it emerged from the echo. And even then, it kept evolving. You're not broken for needing new meaning. You're not lost because what once made sense now feels hollow. That's growth. That's awareness. That's the price of depth. But beware the trap, trying to lock meaning into place, trying to explain everything, wrap it in language, cement it in philosophy. Because the second you name it, it changes. The second you define it, it dissolves. That's the nature of a living truth. It refuses to be pinned down. So what do? You stop trying to own meaning and start experiencing it, moment by moment. Let it be what it is, for now. Let it teach you what it can, for now. And when it shifts, as it always does, let it go. This doesn't mean life is empty. It means life is alive, breathing, morphing, and you are dancing with something too vast to ever be contained. Maybe meaning was never supposed to arrive. Maybe it's meant to move, to stay just out of reach, pulling you forward, deepening your questions, expanding your perception. Because in that chase, something else happens. You grow, you change, you soften, you shed layers, you wake up. And maybe that is the meaning, not the answer, not the destination, but the act of becoming, the movement, the surrender. And so, the next time something hurts and you ask, why? Don't wait for a perfect answer. Let it echo. Let it echo through time. One day you'll look back and say, I didn't understand it then, but I do now. And even now, I know it will change again. Meaning is not the light at the end of the tunnel. It's the flicker that keeps you walking. Compression of self. You weren't always this version of yourself. There was a time when your laughter was louder, your curiosity was wilder, your opinions were messier, more alive. You took up space, not just physically but emotionally, spiritually. You didn't know how to dim your fire, so you burned, unapologetically. But slowly, you learned. You learned that some people flinched when you were too much, that some rooms rewarded silence. That being understood meant shrinking what you said into smaller pieces. That being loved meant being less inconvenient. And so, you began to compress, not all at once. It's never that obvious. You round off your edges. You filter your emotions. You hide your weird thoughts. You simplify your stories. You learn which versions of you are easier to digest, and you serve only those. And people praise you for it. They say you're easy to talk to. Chill, balanced, polite. You're so low maintenance. But what they're really saying is, thank you for not making me uncomfortable. And every time you receive that praise, a part of you dies. Quietly, without a funeral. Because the full version of you was never meant to be bite-sized. It wasn't designed to be universally accepted. It was wild, inconvenient, brilliant, flawed, but real. And now you're just palatable. You've flattened yourself into a version you don't even recognize. You give the world subtitles when you used to speak in poetry. You carry opinions with disclaimers. You feel things and then second-guess them. You present curated pieces of your personality, wrapped in socially approved packaging, and wonder why you feel so far from home in your own skin. You wake up tired, not from the day ahead, but from the performance you have to give. You enter conversations like they're job interviews. You offer the safest opinions. You smile when you want to scream. You say, I'm fine, even when something inside you is begging to be heard. You're not lying, you're surviving. But survival has a cost. You don't even remember what it felt like to be whole, to be unedited, to be a full paragraph instead of a headline. And the worst part? No one else misses the real you, because they never met them. They only ever met the compressed version, the one that fits, the one that pleases, the one that never threatens the balance. And that version, it becomes a prison. You get good at pretending. You make it look easy. But deep down, you're hollowing out. You hear your own voice and it sounds like someone else. You laugh at jokes you don't find funny. You agree with opinions that make your skin crawl. And you keep doing it. Because you've convinced yourself this is the only way to be accepted, to be loved, to be safe. But love built on compression is not love. It's approval. And approval is temporary. It can be revoked the moment you stop performing, the moment you become inconvenient again. And deep down, you know that. That's why you keep compressing. It's why you keep shrinking. Because the fear of being rejected for who you really are feels worse than the numbness of being accepted for who you're not. But there's a question you need to ask yourself, maybe the most important one of all. What if the full version of you is still in there? Not dead, just buried, waiting. Waiting for you to stop apologizing, waiting for you to stop editing, waiting for you to stop performing your own silence. Because there is a version of you that doesn't care if they're liked by everyone, a version that laughs too loudly, that cries when it's not appropriate, that argues when the room is tense, that tells the truth when it's risky, that exists without needing permission. And you miss that version. You miss them so much, it aches in places you don't have names for. But the longer you stay compressed, the harder it becomes to breathe. The more you forget how to speak in your native emotional language. And one day, you wake up surrounded by people who love the version of you that isn't even real, and you feel lonelier than if you were completely alone. Because compression isn't peace, it's just quiet desperation. You weren't made to be reduced. You were made to be understood, even if that understanding only comes from a few, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's messy. So maybe it's time to remember who you were before the shrinking began. Not to abandon the safety you've built, but to question the cost of it. You don't need to explode. You don't need to rip off the mask in one dramatic scene, but you can start. With a sentence you usually censor, with a truth you've been folding into silence, with a laugh that doesn't fit the script, with one decision, just one, to show up fully, even if it makes the room tense. Because the world doesn't need the version of you that plays safe. It needs the version of you that lives true, even if that version isn't easy to swallow, even if it doesn't fit neatly in someone else's expectations, even if it's not bite-sized. Performance becomes identity. At first, it was just survival. A performance, a temporary mask worn to get through the day, to avoid questions, to make others comfortable. You smiled when you were hurting. You laughed when you were numb. You said, "I'm fine" on autopilot, not because you were lying, but because the truth felt too heavy to explain. And over time, that performance started to feel natural. It became muscle memory. The mask wasn't something you wore, it became something you were. And now, even when everything inside you aches, the smile stays. Not out of joy, out of reflex. It's strange, isn't it? How pretending to be okay can quietly harden into identity. How the world rewards your composure, your lightness, your strength, without ever asking if it's real. How the compliments pile up, not for who you are, but for how well you conceal. People love the version of you that doesn't burden them. The agreeable one, the stable one, the one who doesn't cry in public or fall apart inconveniently. And you learn quickly. Authenticity is messy, but performance is praised. So you get better at it. You refine the act. You laugh at the right cues. You talk about your struggles in past tense, even when they're still ongoing. You master the art of seeming in control. But late at night, when the world quiets down and the mask isn't needed, there's this flicker of grief. A deep, wordless sadness. Not just for what hurts, but for the self you abandoned to become acceptable. You wonder, who would I be if I stopped pretending? Would anyone stay? Would anyone recognize me without the constant smile, without the reassurance that I'm strong? Or have I camouflaged so well that the real me would now look like a stranger, even to myself? The danger of prolonged performance is that it blurs the line between survival and self-erasure. You start by faking it until you make it, but eventually, you forget what you were faking in the first place. You adopt the voice, the posture, the optimism, not because they're true, but because they've become the only way you're allowed to exist. Vulnerability? That became a threat. Anger? Too inconvenient. Sadness? Too heavy. So you swallow those parts. You smile instead. And slowly and visibly, you lose access to your own inner world. But the body never lies. It remembers. It stores the unshed tears in your throat. It stores the rage in your clenched jaw. It stores the fear in your tight chest. You may wear the mask perfectly, but your body knows something is off. It knows that the smile isn't joy, that the calm isn't peace, that the performance isn't identity. It's a defense. And over time, even you begin to forget what real feels like, because pretending rewires the mind. Neuroplasticity isn't poetic, it's brutal. The more you suppress, the more normal suppression feels. The more you dismiss your emotions, the more invisible they become. Until one day, you stop even noticing that you're performing. You think, this is just who I am. But it isn't. It's who you had to become. This is why healing often feels like breakdown. Because taking off the mask doesn't reveal a polished, ready self underneath. It reveals the parts that were ignored. The sad, the angry, the scared. And it's tempting to run back to the performance, to wear the smile again. Because that version of you worked. They were functional. They got through the day. They didn't scare people away. But you're not here to perform. You're here to feel, to live, to be real. The hard truth is, many people loved the mask. They loved the you that asked for nothing. The you that didn't challenge, didn't break, didn't feel too deeply. And when you start removing the performance, some will pull away. Not because you're too much, but because your truth holds up a mirror to their own denial. Your authenticity disrupts the balance, and that's okay, because your job was never to be easy to love. Your job is to exist fully, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You're not broken for feeling disconnected from your own face, from your own smile. That dissonance you feel, it's the beginning of truth returning. It's the echo of your real self, whispering beneath the noise, beneath the habits, beneath the act. And though it may take time, that voice is still yours, still alive, still waiting. You don't have to abandon everything. You don't have to rip the mask off in one violent motion. You can begin gently, by noticing the moments when you're performing and choosing, just once, to stop, to pause, to say, actually, I'm not okay, or to cry without apology, or to feel anger without explanation. That's how you reclaim the self beneath the show. Because identity isn't a script, it's a dialogue between who you were told to be and who you actually are when no one's watching. And you deserve to meet yourself again. Not the polished version, the raw one, the scared one, the alive one. That's the self who never needed to be perfect, just present. So yes, the smile may stay longer than it should. It may feel like it's fused to your skin. But underneath it, your real face is still there. Not broken, not weak. Just waiting to be allowed back into the light. Reflections that lie back. You look in the mirror and expect the truth. A clean, sharp reflection. Just glass and light. Just surface and angles. But that's not what you see. What you see isn't neutral. It's filtered, warped, shaped by something deeper than your eyes. Because your mirror doesn't reflect your face. It reflects your expectations. And some days, it lies to you with kindness. You catch a glimpse and you feel okay. Maybe even beautiful. The lines are soft. The features align. You breathe easier. For a moment, you feel whole, but you don't trust it. You wonder, am I just having a good day? Or is the mirror lying? Other days, it's brutal. You see every flaw, every inch you wish you could carve away. Your eyes look tired. Your skin feels wrong. Your posture betrays the weight you carry. And none of it may be real. But it feels real. Because mirrors don't just show light. They reflect your state of mind. The mirror becomes a mood ring for your self-worth. You stare too long, trying to find the truth. But the longer you look, the less sure you become. The image shifts. Not in the glass, but in you. You pose, you tilt, you frown, you try again. You ask, is this really what I look like? And the truth is, that question has no stable answer. Because how you see yourself is never just visual. It's emotional, historical, layered with memory and judgment and fear. The mirror doesn't care, but your brain does. It projects stories onto your reflection. Old ones, harsh ones. Stories that started when you were young, when someone laughed or stared or compared you to someone else. So now, your reflection isn't just a face. It's a battlefield. It's where your insecurities rehearse their lines. It's where your confidence shows up shaky and late. And even when someone compliments you, you glance at the mirror and wonder, were they just being kind? Did they see something I missed or ignore something I can't unsee? You start to mistrust praise. You start to think the mirror is more honest than the people who love you. But what if the mirror isn't honest either? What if it only tells you what you already believe? You walk in after a hard day, and the mirror confirms your worst thoughts. You walk in after good news, and it still tells you you're not enough. You fix your posture, fix your hair, fix your face, but the feeling doesn't fix, because the mirror doesn't reflect your reality. It reflects your relationship with yourself. And that relationship isn't static. It changes with your mood, with your hormones, with your memories. You're not just looking at yourself. You're looking at how you feel about yourself. And that means some reflections will lie to protect you, and others will lie to destroy you. And the hardest part is, they all feel real. So, what do you trust? You trust consistency, not the mirror, but the you that exists when you're not looking. You trust the moments you forgot to check, the moments you were laughing too hard to care how you looked, the moments you were helping someone and your reflection disappeared. You trust the version of you that lives in motion, not trapped in glass, because that's where your truth is. Not in stillness, not in lighting, not in critique, but in being. So, the next time the mirror betrays you, remember this. It's not showing your face. It's showing your fear. It's showing your doubt. It's showing the stories you've been fed about what beauty is, what value is, what you're supposed to look like just to feel worthy. And you don't have to believe it, because sometimes the truest thing you can do is look away, not to escape, but to reclaim. Because the real reflection, it's not on the wall, it's in how you treat people, in how you show up, in how you forgive yourself when no one's watching. And no mirror will ever capture that. Memories that never happened. You remember it clearly, the way they smiled, the words they said, the place, the smell, the light slanting through the window. A moment. Perfect. Specific. Emotional. But when you bring it up, they look confused. They don't remember. Or worse, they say it never happened. And suddenly, the moment that felt like a truth you could stand on crumbles. You're left holding a memory like a photograph someone tells you is fake. This is memories that never happened, when your mind creates moments so vivid, so real, that they become part of your identity, even if they were never true. It's not about lying, not to others, not even to yourself. It's about survival. Your brain, when faced with gaps, missing time, emotional neglect, traumatic blanks, tries to fill in the silence, and it does it with fragments. A look from someone else, a story you heard, a dream you forgot was a dream. Over time, those pieces arrange themselves into a narrative, a memory, and because your emotional system responds as if it were real, it feels real. But what if it's not? What if you've built your understanding of who you are around a moment that never happened? This doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're human. Memory isn't a camera. It's a storyteller. It doesn't record reality. It rewrites it, smooths it over, makes sense of it. And when the pain is too much, it creates comfort. When the abandonment is too deep, it creates connection. You might remember your parents tucking you in every night, not because they did, but because you needed them to. You might recall a friend saying, "I'll never leave you," even if they never said a word. These false moments become emotional placeholders, and they shape you. You move through the world with these phantom truths stitched into your psyche. They guide your trust, your fear, your love. You say, "I know they cared about me. I remember." But the person says, "I never said that." Or, "That's not how it happened." And in that instant, you feel reality shift. Like the floor tilting under your feet. Like a part of your past being deleted in real time. And yet, the feeling won't go away. Because even if the memory was false, the need behind it was real. Some memories are manufactured by trauma. Your brain, overwhelmed by chaos, fills the empty space with something it can process, an order, a reason, a meaning. So the memory isn't a lie, it's a protection. like a child drawing a happy face over a cracked wall. You're not pretending, you're repairing. But what happens when the repair becomes your truth? You may cling to memories no one else shares, moments of intimacy, moments of pain, moments that define who you became. But every time they're challenged by someone else's version, by cold facts, by silence, you feel betrayed. Not by others, but by yourself. You start to question everything. If that wasn't real, what else isn't? Am I making all of this up? Can I even trust my mind? This is the most dangerous cost. The erosion of self-trust. Because when the foundation of memory cracks, identity follows. You start to doubt not just your past, but your instincts, your emotions, your version of the world. You become afraid to speak your truth because you no longer know if it is truth. And so, you silence yourself. You minimize, you rewrite, you gaslight yourself before anyone else can. But here's the paradox. Even false memories carry real emotions. The grief was real, the love was real, the abandonment was real. Even if the scene your mind painted isn't accurate, the feeling was. And that feeling deserves validation. That need deserves compassion. You aren't broken because your brain created a moment that never happened. You're adaptive. Your mind built scaffolding to hold up the parts of you no one else supported. You are not the sum of your memories. You are the sum of your needs. And those needs are not lies. Maybe the person never hugged you like you remember. Maybe the words you recall were never spoken. But if you remember being loved, it means you needed love. If you remember being saved, it means you needed saving. That's not weakness. That's evidence of your humanity. And sometimes, maybe your mind gave you a gift, a memory you never got to live, but desperately needed to believe, not to deceive you, but to keep you breathing, to keep you hoping. And in that sense, even the false memory becomes sacred. So don't hate your mind for what it did. Don't wage war on your memory. Instead, ask, what truth was this trying to protect? What pain was it trying to soften? Because beneath the illusion is a truth deeper than fact. You didn't invent those moments to lie to yourself. You invented them to save yourself. And maybe now, with time and healing, you don't need them the same way. Maybe now you can look at those memories not as betrayals, but as bridges. Bridges that got you across something unbearable. Bridges that, even if made of fiction, kept you from falling. So thank them, and let them go when you're ready. Because now, you are real. The kindness that kills, you were kind. That was your strength. That was your weapon. That was your identity. Until it became the reason you started to disappear. You kept the peace. Smiled through discomfort. Chose silence over conflict. You told yourself it was empathy, that if you just gave more, loved harder, forgave faster, everything would work out. That kindness would heal. That softness would save. But it didn't. They didn't stop taking. They didn't notice the bruises in your tone, the weight behind your eyes, the cracks you carefully painted over every morning. Because why would they? You made it easy. You became the soft place they landed while they tore pieces off of you. You let them. Not because you were weak, but because you were wired for care. You were the fixer, the emotional sponge, the one who held space for everyone, except yourself. And over time, the kindness that once felt sacred felt like a death sentence. They called you strong, resilient, the nice one. And maybe that was the worst part, because kindness became your prison. You weren't allowed to get angry. You weren't allowed to say no. You weren't allowed to need, because you were the kind one, remember? So you swallowed the resentment. You told yourself they didn't mean to, that they were hurting too, that your patience was noble, that one day they'd see your sacrifice and offer it back. But they didn't, because you trained them not to. You trained them to take. You taught them that your boundaries were flexible, that your forgiveness was infinite, that you'd bend before you'd break. And when you finally broke, they were surprised, confused, even offended, because they only knew how to love the version of you that gave without limits. That's what happens when kindness isn't rooted in self-respect. It turns into a slow erosion. You don't even notice it at first. Just a little less laughter, a little more exhaustion, a strange ache where your joy used to live. And by the time you realize you're running on empty, You're already so far gone that even resting feels like rebellion. But here's the truth. Real kindness doesn't mean martyrdom. Real kindness has boundaries. Real kindness says, I will help you, but not at the cost of myself. Real kindness knows that being soft doesn't mean being silent. It means being conscious of where your energy goes and who deserves it, because not everyone does. Some people love your kindness only because it makes you easier to manipulate. Some people will praise your compassion while bleeding you dry. Some people confuse loving you with using you gently. But it's still use, and it still kills. Kills your spirit, kills your self-worth, kills your joy. So, if you feel guilty for pulling back, don't. If you feel shame for saying no, don't. If you're scared that being assertive makes you cold, remember this. Boundaries are not cruelty. They're clarity. They are the lines that protect the part of you that loves the world, and you must protect it. Because once that part dies, everything dims. You are allowed to say, I've given enough. You are allowed to walk away from people who only show up when they need something. You are allowed to choose yourself. Not once you're broken, not once you've lost everything. But now, while there's still something left to save, your kindness is not a flaw. It's a gift. But a gift isn't a demand, and love isn't a transaction, and empathy isn't a currency to buy affection. You don't owe your energy to anyone who treats it like a resource. You don't owe your healing to people who caused your wounds, and you don't owe your loyalty to those who only valued you when you were easy. So be kind, but be loud, be kind, but be guarded, be kind, but be whole. Because kindness without self-respect is just self-destruction in a prettier costume, and the world does not need another burnt-out soul pretending that their silence is saintly. The world needs you, fully, fiercely, kindly, awake. Knowing but not acting. You know exactly what to do. You've read the books, you've had the conversations, you've played the scenario over in your head 1,000 times. You know what would help, what would change things, what would begin the healing. And still, you don't do it. That's the silent war inside so many of us. The gap between knowing and doing, the space where awareness lives, but action doesn't. And in that space, so many lives rot slowly in full consciousness. Not because they're lost, but because they're stuck. Stuck knowing the answer and still not moving. You know that exercise would help your anxiety. You know that message could mend the relationship. You know that boundary would give you peace. You know that quitting that job, leaving that person, breaking that habit, it would liberate you. And still, you do nothing. Not because you're lazy, not because you're weak, but because knowing isn't the hard part. Acting is. Action requires risk, requires discomfort, requires the death of the identity that benefits from your current suffering. And yes, you do benefit, even from your own pain, because pain becomes a home, a rhythm, a story you can tell yourself when nothing else makes sense. It becomes the reason you don't try, the reason you don't hope, the reason you stay small. And the mind loves that story because it doesn't require change. Awareness is seductive. It gives you the illusion of progress. You say, I'm self-aware. I know my patterns. I know what I need. And so you feel like you're doing something, like reflection is redemption. But it's not. Awareness without action is just observation. You're not transforming. You're spectating. Watching yourself repeat the same cycles with full knowledge of every mistake as it happens. That's not wisdom. That's paralysis dressed in philosophy. It's the addict who knows they're addicted and still pours the drink. It's the lover who knows the relationship is dead but stays for comfort. It's the dreamer who writes plans and makes lists and sets alarms and never starts. They know. You know. And yet nothing changes. Because knowledge doesn't ignite transformation. Emotion does. Urgency does. Desperation does. The pain has to become so loud, it drowns out your fear. The vision of who you could be has to burn brighter than the comfort of who you are now. But most days, the comfort wins. Because change means letting go, and letting go means grieving the identity you built to survive. Even if that identity is small. Even if it hurts you. It's familiar. And familiarity is seductive. Even when it's killing you. You scroll through advice, you bookmark solutions. You say, I'll start tomorrow. and the days pile up like bodies, full of unchosen possibilities, full of truths you understood, but never lived. So you need to hear this. Knowing isn't enough. Knowing how to heal doesn't mean you will. Knowing who to become doesn't mean you will evolve. You can be the most enlightened person in the room and still be broken because you never did the thing. You never crossed the bridge. You stood at the edge, staring into the water, explaining it, analyzing it, naming the depth, the current, the temperature. But you never jumped. You want to change? Then jump. Not when it's perfect, not when it's safe, not when the fear is gone. Now. Even with shaking hands, even with a mind screaming that you're not ready, because you won't ever be ready. You'll always have a reason to wait, a justification to delay, a new theory to explore instead of making the call, cutting the tie, or walking out the door. But your future doesn't live in knowing. It lives in doing. So stop worshiping awareness like it's a savior. It's just a mirror. And mirrors don't save you. They show you the face of someone who can save themselves, but hasn't yet. That's the truth you don't want to look at. The part that hurts the most. The part that says, you're not waiting for answers, you're avoiding decisions, but there's still time. There's still breath in you. There's still fire. And if you're lucky, if you're honest, today could be the day you finally choose to cross the line between knowing and becoming. Not because you've learned enough, but because you're done waiting. Alive but unanchored, you wake up. You go through the motions. You respond when someone calls your name. You nod at the right times. You laugh at jokes you barely register. You eat, you sleep, you even smile sometimes. But beneath all of it, there's a distance, a strange, weightless detachment, as if your body is doing the living, but you are hovering just outside of it, as if you're watching your own life from behind a sheet of glass that no one else can see. You are alive, but unanchored. It's not dramatic. It's subtle. That's what makes it so haunting. You're not in agony. You're just not quite here. You go through entire days like a ghost playing a human. Words come out of your mouth, but they feel rehearsed. Conversations end, and you barely remember what you said. You're surrounded by the textures of life, sounds, colors, movement, but none of it really lands. It's like living in a dream that never admits it's a dream. This isn't numbness, not exactly. It's more like dislocation, emotional vertigo. You're not disconnected from the world. You're just not rooted in it. You're floating a few inches above your life, close enough to touch it, but never fully inside it. And that distance, it wears on you. Because you remember what it felt like to be grounded, to feel things fully, to laugh with your whole body, to cry without watching yourself cry, to fall into a moment so deeply that everything else disappeared. But now, every moment feels slightly behind you or ahead of you, but never with you. There's a name for this feeling: derealization, depersonalization, a quiet dissociation from the present moment, often triggered not by trauma alone, but by survival. When life has hurt you enough times, when reality has become too sharp, your mind doesn't always break. It drifts. It lifts you out of the unbearable and sets you down somewhere slightly safer, above, near, but never within. Maybe it started gradually. One heartbreak too many, one loss you didn't have time to grieve, one moment where your body stayed, but your soul checked out. And slowly over time, the disconnect became the default. A coping mechanism turned permanent state. You still laugh, you still show up. But there's always a part of you hovering just behind your own eyes, watching, monitoring, waiting for the moment it's safe to re-enter. But when does safety return? What defines it? Is it the absence of pain? The presence of joy? The answer isn't clear, and so you float. Because entering fully into the now would mean re-entering the place where everything happened, the place where memory lives. And that kind of presence feels like risk. It feels like vulnerability. It feels like saying, I am here now, and accepting everything that here contains. And yet, you want to come back. You ache for it. You miss the weight of your own existence. You miss laughing without wondering how you sound. You miss being touched and feeling it fully, not just skin to skin, but soul to soul. You miss being in a room and belonging there, not just observing it like an outsider peeking in. You miss the gravity of being real. But gravity doesn't return all at once. You don't snap back into reality like a switch. You re-enter slowly, moment by moment, through small choices, through grounding, through breath, through noticing the texture of your coffee cup, the warmth of sunlight on your arm, the way your feet feel against the floor. You anchor not by force, but by attention. Gentle attention, repeated attention. Some days you'll feel more present. Others, the drift will return. That's not failure. That's the tide of healing. Being alive but unanchored doesn't mean you're broken. It means you're in transition. You're between the wound and the re-entry, between disconnection and belonging, between the safety of distance and the risk of presence. And in this space, this float, you are not alone. So many people are walking through life like you, performing normalcy, feeling unreal, wondering if anyone else feels the same. They do. You're not a ghost. You're not defective. You're someone who adapted, someone who learned how to survive the unbearable by stepping outside of it. And now, you're learning how to step back in, slowly, bravely, one breath at a time. So, if you feel like you're not really in your life, know this: you're still here. Even if you feel untethered, even if your voice sounds far away, even if your hands don't quite feel like yours, you're here. You're alive. And you are allowed to take your time finding your way back to the ground. Don't rush it. Don't shame it. Just keep choosing presence when you can. Keep choosing your body, your now, your breath. Because every time you do, the distance shrinks, the fog thins, and the person who was always inside, watching, waiting, takes one step closer to being fully home again.